G'day, folks. AoS Coach here, and we are talking all things Ironjawz. Now, this is a little different, you might notice, for those people who are watching, because I have both heads of Gorkamorka here. So, first off, we are talking 4th edition Age of Sigmar. We're talking Ironjawz, and I'm joined by two of probably some of my favorite Ironjawz players in Australia, possibly the world, although Scooter's pretty bloody good as well. There's a couple of you, much love to my Ironjawz people who are pushing their pigs. But so my two guests are coming in, both represented Australia from the World Championships of Warhammer last year, have been doing quite well on the competitive scene in 4th edition. First off, I have the brutal but cunning Mitch Bugg, who embodies the raw, straightforward power of orcs with that touch of cleverness. Then I also have the cunning but brutal David Sulava, who is embodying the sneaking, underhanding tactics that still pack a punch. So hopefully I did Gorkamorka justice in that introduction. G'day, welcome. Mitch is laughing his ass
You're
off.
right, you're right.
Mitch,
I'm just here to have a good time, boys. Yeah. Look, we're here to talk about Warhammer, not Warhammer. So everything Ironjawz tonight. It's good.
Oh, I can't. This is funny. So originally, the joke here is that I invited David to chat. You went 4-1 at Border War, if I remember correctly, or if not, I'm making up an event. Bathurst GT. That's it. I remember there was an event. And then I invited Dave, and Dave's like, Mitch and I talk a lot. Let's do it together. And I'm like, I haven't done a duo combo for a while because it's like herding cats. But in true Gorkamorka style, we've got both heads here to give us the different perspective of Ironjawz. And I'm really excited to understand this because, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the Ironjawz community is pretty negged out, man. Like when I see the general commentary about 4th edition, whether it's the rules, whether it's the position of Ironjawz and their win percentage, the fact that in a very heavy cavalry meta right now, where you're seeing like Varangard and Hex Raids and all of these cavalry doing really well, the piggies aren't doing justice compared to their counterparts. So I'm really curious to get under the hood, talk Ironjawz. Is it that we're just doing piggies wrong? Is it time for the more grunter? Is it back to brutes? What are we thinking about Gordrak versus the more crusher? There's so many mores now. I'm getting lost in like more crusher, more everything. Anyway, Mitch, introduce yourself. Who are you and why do you love Ironjawz?
G'day, I'm Mitch Bugg from Australia. I've been playing Destruction Armies as a whole. That means goblins, orcs, ogres, and giants for a few years competitively now. Last season, which was here last year, I played strictly Ironjawz, and that's actually where I met Dave. We first met in Atlanta. So went over to the World Championships, and we both played Ironjawz and. Very, very similar list, in fact. I think there might have been one unit in... I think you ran 10 brutes, Dave, if that's right. I think you ran one unit slightly different.
The same list. All hunters
was very close.
Yeah, it was very, very close. But yeah, we've been in touch ever since, and we've been to a few tournaments together now. And I think anytime it comes to Ironjawz, Dave is always... he has a similar take to me, but it's always a little bit more cunning, whereas I'm a little bit more brutal. So I always enjoy talking to him about his games and saying, how did you use this unit or how did you do that? And he always comes up with something that interests me, and we've got such a different idea of it, but they both seem to work and we both enjoy, sharing our thoughts. So, yeah.
And what about yourself, Dave?
Yeah, well, I'm David. I'm also from Australia. I've been playing Ironjawz since pretty much AoS 2. I've loved them throughout all editions. And when AoS 4 came out, I didn't really even look at other armies. I'm like I'm just going to go Ironjawz, whether they're good or bad. But it was funny because when AoS 4 when it hit, I was sick with the flu, and then after the flu, I got COVID, so I didn't really get a time to really look into a lot of lists. And then I signed up for Bathurst. I was going to catch up with Mitch and the crew up there. And then I thought, Ironjawz, like let's have a look at what they do. And I was having a look at Ironjawz, and I was like, oh, I'm like, Ironjawz, they're just not doing very well. Like, they just seem like they're just lackluster. So I quickly messaged Mitch, and I'm like, Mitch, what the hell's with Ironjawz at the moment? And Mitch is like, nah, brother, trust me, they're good. When you get brutes on the field and when they slap, it's gonna be like, now I refer to them as Mike Tyson, you know, like little units of Mike Tyson, where everyone's got a plan until you get hit in the face, right? And that's exactly what brutes do. So yeah, so pretty much now I'm a really big advocate of Ironjawz. They may not be the FIFO army that we all wanted, but I definitely think they have legs. So that's yeah, a little bit about what's happening right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting as I've been preparing for this discussion and looking at people's lists, and Scooter has just gone incredibly well at Nova, and we'll show off Scooter's list. I saw Aaron Newbaum, another American, do relatively well with a Rages list, so really building into like MSU brute Rages, just going absolutely crazy. Or might have been just like lots of like 6-man units of Rages. You're seeing Gordrak, you're seeing Kragnos, you're seeing, there hasn't seemed to be like that one silver bullet list. Like most armies, you can kind of tell the cookie cutter list. Like Stormcast are going to have Annihilators. You've seen Snake Spam still in Daughters of Cain. There's each army has that battle formation or those units that people just seem to stick with. But Ironjawz, it feels like one of those factions that people are still trying to work out, because 4th edition has brought some changes. The faction has changed, not massively changes, but there's been enough changes where it's like, what do I do? Is it the Maw Crusher and a bunch of pigs? Is it brutes? Is it, like, what am I doing? And for some people last year who were playing with Big War, that's no longer an option for them. Like, they can't use the Kruleboy crutch. So it's like, where do I build? And I think that's what I'm excited about in this discussion. So maybe I might throw it over to Dave. I'll go to you first. Given your success at Bathurst, how have you found 4th edition treating Ironjawz? Now, it's a open question when it comes to obviously the new battle tactics, the size of objectives, the way that command points work, the new commands that are available to us, or even the fact that you can charge those piggies into a unit now and not have to worry about Unleash Hell. There's so many changes that has happened. What have you found from your experience so far with Ironjawz?
Ironjawz, I feel, are they're in a really interesting place, commenting a little bit about what you were saying before. I feel like people are still experimenting with different lists. I think that traditionally when people think about Ironjawz, I think that they think about first turn, let's just charge in and let's just do as much damage as they can. And I think when the 4th edition dropped, I feel what's happened is that, they looked at our typically fast units like Gore Grunters, and they don't hit as hard as what they used to before. And I think that when people saw all these changes, the lack of Destroyer, the lack of Mighty Destroyers even being able to move the additional 3 times in the hero phase, people started thinking, or even I started thinking, okay, well, turn 1, what can I really do? Brutes only move 4 inches. But they have given us a lot of different tools in AoS 4 that have been really good, and Mitch was one of the people who was really advocating the power of brutes. And there's, I'm sure we'll get to it later on, there's an artifact that you can give one of your heroes to make them redeploy 4 inches. And I think that redeploy was one of the really big changes in AoS 4, where you don't have to be within 9 inches now. You can do it at the end of the movement phase. So it's made our guys sneaky fast, I guess, because potentially you can move up to 7 inches in your hero in your opponent's turn. And then another thing I was talking about with Mitch, we talk a lot, as you can see.
I noticed.
I was real gutted about gore grunters not being able to move after the combat phase, and Mitch is like, well, have you considered power through? And again, so it's like we lost a lot of tools, but we've also gained a couple of tools. But it has ultimately, I feel, changed the army in a way that will require people to adapt. It's not the typical smashing and bashing that they may be used to. It's more of I think it's more of a calculated approach. So I think that's pretty much, how I would summarize it.
And I know in the little group chat we had before this, I saw some talk about, like, they kind of almost play a little bit like Khorne, where you think that Khorne just wants to completely smash, but there's a lot of little techie pieces that don't necessarily want you to just completely charge and just try to wipe someone out and you take the double turn. There's a lot of moving pieces which will reward some people, but for other people they just want to run forward, and that's totally okay, I guess. Mitch, anything from yourself?
I agree.
Like, what's
I think.
Oh, sorry, keep going, Dave.
No, I'm happy for Mitch to take it on from here.
I'll take the lead. No, look, more to what Dave was saying and yourself, Coach, is that I think in the previous edition you'd pretty much just see pigs, or you'd see Iron Suns and a lot of brutes, right? So you could get those counter charges off. Counter charge was very rare in the old edition. The Glockkin had it, Iron Suns had it, and it would throw people off massively. It threw me off. I know that for sure. But now that counter charge is in the game, and with the edition still finding its feet, I think that's what's really cool about Ironjawz now, is that you don't just open up the book and just pick Gore Grunters and go, yep, that's what I'm choosing. You actually have to think. You have to kind of, I guess, use your mind a little bit and piece together what you think might work, and have a little bit of fun with it. Take your losses, take your wins, and really figure out what works for you. Because, I remember running pretty much pigs and a Mork crusher in Atlanta and last season, and I could pretty much write down on a piece of paper the step-by-step for how I would play that list. Okay, you run your war chanters, you buff them up with their damage, you send them in, wipe out the screens, move back, and you'd kind of just rinse and repeat until you're ready to full send and get them in. But I love it now. I really, really do. I like how many different units you can potentially take. Big pigs are my personal favorite. I think they do have play now. I think they're a little bit overcosted last edition, but they've had a few tweaks. And I think certain units that I guess we didn't use in the old edition just sit nicely in the new edition for various reasons, which we'll get into later. But yeah, I think it's good to be green. I think it's a good day to be green. And yeah, I think Ironjawz have got a lot of play.
Anything else you want to add to that, Dave?
I mean, exactly like what Mitch was saying, like the way that they're playing now, it's different. You have to use a lot more of your arsenal. I do think we probably are more akin to Khorne and how they're playing now, especially with Mighty Destroyers and how that works. And, Gore Grunters have a different role in the army, which I'm sure we'll get to later on. But yeah, I agree with everything that Mitch said, totally.
Cool. What's your favorite interaction so far? Have you had a particular moment, a particular rule? Like, I love power through as an example, right? The magical intervention's another one. Obviously, counter charge. I don't know what your counter charges are like. I fail more than I succeed. But,
yeah.
But
That's and it's pricey.
I think
originally when I was reading, sorry, Dave, you can go. You can have this one.
All right, thank you. I think my favorite interaction so far was actually in Bathurst. Now the thing is, brutes, they've got 3 wounds, so if you're going to be charging him to like typical 1-2 wounds, like battle line or whatever you want to call them now, they can do power through, and this is what I mean by they're sneaky fast, because if they've got a couple of models left, they can power through, and then on the opponent's turn, you can do Mighty Destroyers and move. So all of a sudden, they've moved 7 inches. And it's like, and you can tie people up. So I remember my brutes by turn 2, I forgot the name of the battle plan we're playing on. It was one that was vertically aligned. And my brutes at the start of the turn 1, they were at the bottom, at deployment. By the end of the game, they were pretty much at the back of the opponent's army. And I was just thinking, like, it's crazy. They moved 4 inches. Like with all these little tricks that you've got, they can actually move, like I mentioned before, sneaky fast. So if you utilize it, they're great.
Yeah, I agree.
Great.
I think originally when I was reading the rules, I thought that counter charge was going to be massive. I thought counter charge was going to be my favorite because I always played, I always played the ham spam. I played the Kevin Bacon, the Ironjawz list, and I never ran the Iron Suns. And I always wanted that counter charge, but when I heard it was coming out, I thought, hell, this is going to be rad. But I do love the fact that I can cast spells in my opponent's turn, especially with these endless spells coming out now. My Cron Spine, I've had it for a long time, and I've never really used it. And all of a sudden now I can use it every game, and I can use it over and over and over again. If it dies, it comes back. If it dies, it comes back. So yeah, I think Magical Intervention's rad. I think it's awesome.
Can I tell you my favorite thing without actually ever doing it? But it's just the idea
what is it?
that gets me excited. It gets me hard. And that is the fact that I could run Gordrak and three more Crushers if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Because there's no battleline requirements
yeah.
anymore. If I just want to have 4 big Crushers, or I wanted to have, I don't know, all the pigs in the world, you know, those big pigs, I can. That plays into the Timmy. But also, there's like obviously so many new units. I'm seeing Zorgrog being played recently. You never saw him when he came out for the first time.
Correct. Yeah.
You're seeing the Tusk Boar on Grunter. Sorry, you're seeing more and more of these units that really hadn't seen play. And when they came out, people were just spamming those Brute Rages because they were super cheap. So you're actually now starting to see more diverse lists, which has been curious to me.
Yeah, I love it. I love the freedom that comes with Ironjawz at the moment. I mean, you're starting to see certain lists and certain armies start to, you know, like let's say ogres for instance. I've recently took out a GT with ogres. You're starting to see. Yeah, you're starting to see certain lists like that where you look at
Australian internet. This is wild. You back?
Sorry, have I got you back?
Yeah, you're back.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I was what I was saying was you're starting to see ogres, let's say, and everybody's go-to is gluttons, right? With Ironjawz, we haven't really seen that yet. I love the fact that I can look at Ironjawz and see people that are doing well, like there's just so many different lists at the moment. I love it.
Do you want to repeat yourself? You dropped out again. Australian internet on a Tuesday. It's wild. Stop downloading Game of Thrones, folks. Please. Like, we're over. The season's done.
No, that's fine. Simple point I was making was there's certain armies that have found their go-tos, like ogres with gluttons, but Ironjawz haven't found that yet. I love how diverse it is, and everyone's starting to find success with different things. That's great.
Which is a good thing because we know gluttons are going to go up, right? So people are spamming things like hex rays, you know they're going to get changed. Gluttons, you know they're going to get changed. Varangard, you know they're going to get changed. But you look at this, you're like, you know what? I could start an Ironjawz army, and probably points are going to go down more than anything. They're not going to go up. I'm not going to get nerfed. My favorite unit isn't going to get a rule completely rewritten because it's broken. You're actually quite well served for 4th edition.
Yep, agreed. Fully agreed.
It's just hard when you look over the fence and everyone's got all these busted rules and like, you know, trogs are healing all the time. And you're like, man, like it's hard in these early days, but just stick to the course. And once those changes come through, you'll be in a better spot.
Yeah.
All right. Without further ado, let's actually bring up some rules and let's get through and talk a bit about like how we look at this. And given that there's 3 people, I'm going to mostly let Mitch and Dave kind of run the show here. So Mitch, you know, like again, I'm assuming by now people have looked at their books, they've got the rules on the screen, but talk to me about Mighty Destroyers and how you think and play and like, what does this mean to you and your army rebuild?
Yeah, look, the first thing that I noticed, I guess, reading this rule was it's any hero phase. That's massive. Like, Mighty Destroyers in any hero phase is huge because what that means is essentially you can have your plan. You can say, okay, well, my units are going to go here and take this objective, or they're going to go and wipe this General's Regiment unit out for a tactic and things like that. And what you can do is you can just move across, tag a unit in combat, and all of a sudden their options are a lot more limited. So for that reason, Mighty Destroyers is huge. Like it's what Dave was saying earlier. They've just got massive tricks, huge tricks. Like let's say you're going to have a unit of anything, right? But for whatever reason, let's choose Gore Grunters. You've got a reinforced unit of Gore Grunters. You can go in and wipe a screen. You know, all of a sudden, you know, they've deployed their unit behind. They don't want to be in combat. You can just move slightly forward and tag them. It's great. Like the pin and win's still alive. You've got a lot of movement tricks, and a lot of people can forget that in the heat of the game. They can think, right, here's my game plan. I've formulated it, you know, for however long it's taken me to formulate, and all of a sudden you've thrown a spanner in the works. Now, you know, they've got a lot more thinking to do, and when they're doing the thinking on the fly, there's more, you know, there's more chance for something to go wrong, which is what you want essentially in a game. I love Mighty Destroyers. I think it's great.
Before I get Dave to add maybe additional thoughts to it, I want to put a counterpoint to this. And if you remember the old Mighty Destroyers and how it worked, you could possibly look at this as a potential nerf. Like, I used to be able to charge in my turn. I used to be able to make a full move. But here I am just getting 3 inches. Like, 3 inches doesn't seem like a lot, but yet you're very excited. Is it the fact that it's just the hero phase, or what's making it exciting for you?
I think when I mean, I'll be the number one person to say, when I read that, I thought, oh no, like they've nerfed Mighty Destroyers, it's gone, like Mighty Destroyers is dead. It was exactly the same with and I'll say it again, it's not the Ogre show, it's the Ironjawz show, but let's say, for instance, Ogres would charge, you know, they might roll an 11 on the charge, and then they're rolling 11, you know, potential mortal wounds. When I read that it was a lot of the mortal wounds and essentially charge, you know, is only D3 mortal wounds these days, I was like, wow, that's a massive nerf. But it actually isn't. It's just relevant to the game and relevant to the edition and how it plays. I think if you had old Mighty Destroyers in this edition, it would be very, very overpowered. So, you know, I was kind of panicky at first, thinking, oh, they've nerfed it into the ground. But no, I think it's just it's a nice, comfortable rule that plays well with the edition, I think. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be anything more than that. If it did, I think it'd need a nerf massively. I think you'd see people, you know, abusing it, you know, all across the country and all across the world.
Dave, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the really cool thing about Mighty Destroyers, I think it's 2 really cool things. One, it doesn't cost a CP, which I think is just something that you get to do for free. And I also feel it's something that is very relevant throughout the entire game. Whether it's you want to, you know, move the additional 3 inches at the start to sort of get you to a particular point or whatever it is, or whether it is, you know, turn 3 on your opponent's turn 3, you move 3 inches in their hero phase and deny them a battle tactic, because all of a sudden now you've tied their unit up in combat. So whereas I found Mighty Destroyers was really amazing in the last edition, I found that, you know, that initial movement was really only powerful in the early game. And then as the game sort of progressed, it probably become less and less relevant. Whereas I think that Mighty Destroyers now being able to move 3 inches in any hero phase and even into combat, I think that it's very relevant the entire game. So yeah, I think it's great. It's different, but it's great.
Dave, if I can add one thing to that too, is that, you know, a lot of the games that I played, my Ironjawz, and, you know, tried to lean into Mighty Destroyers, there were so many times on certain battle plans or certain armies and matchups I faced where they would just tag you on that 12-inch line, so that way you couldn't actually get your full movement. You would have to make a charge, right? So it was a lot easier to shut down, you know, when you're up on the top tables and there were some high-level players against you. They would just tag your pigs, let's say, and too bad you weren't able to really do a lot with Mighty Destroyers. But yeah, I think now it's really nice, especially the simple fact that, you know, you can be in combat to do it. So it's good.
Yeah, the fact that you can tie up people in combat is a nice ability. The guarantee of 3, regardless of hero phases, is quite helpful, and it'll help you, to your point, deny battle tactics, score battle tactics, get you closer to combat, make that charge easier. It turns, you know, your brutes from a move of 4 to a move of 7. It turns your Mork grunter from a 10 to a 13. It gives you so much flexibility. Yes, it's only 1 unit, but it does give you really interesting tools to play around with, as opposed to
one other thing. If I can just sort of add to that, one thing that I've done all the time, Mighty Destroyers is not a pile-in, and I think that it's very easy to get it confused with a pile-in. So if you have a unit of brutes that have tied up, you know, a unit of whatever it is, you can actually, as long as you stay within combat, you can pile in a way to make Mighty Destroyers the unit a little bit further away, or just tag him on the edge, so that now all of a sudden your opponent can't get all their units into your brutes. So by piling in or moving the Mighty Destroyers sort of it's still in combat, but say 2.9 inches away, you can effectively cut out a lot of models from being able to attack you. So I think there's a lot of uses like that I think that people may not think about, that I think is really, really good.
Love it. Love it. There's a lot of use cases for it. I think it just brings an extra dimension. Then I run forward, I charge forward, I pile in. While we've got Dave talking, I'll throw it over to you for the Ironjawz War. Now, love a good war. I'm not going to make you war. You probably wake up your kids and you war. But it is tradition that you must war at a tournament when you issue the war. Talk to me about the war, Dave. How are you tapping into it? Because it's a nice little rule, man. +1 to that charge roll, +1 attack. Like there's so much good stuff that comes out of this.
Look, war's great. You know, I feel like it has been nerfed a little bit to, you know, the way that it used to be before. It was board wide, and you can do it pretty much as long as your general or a hero was calling it, or your general rather. You were good. Now you have to be wholly within 18 inches of whoever's calling it, which is, it's not a bad thing. 18 inches is pretty large. But look, the add 1 to charge rolls for, you know, that one pivotal turn is I think it's coming clutch. I can't even count how many times. I just love the +1 to charge. Add 1 to the attacks characteristics of those units' melee weapons. That is actually a little bit of a nerf, believe it or not, because from my understanding of the Ironjawz War, it doesn't affect companion weapons. I think it only affects non-companion weapons. So look, war's great. Was something that, you know, when you need it, it's there, and when you need to deal that devastating blow, say you're going into a gargant, it's something that you want to call. I'm a really big advocate of calling the war either turn 2 or turn 3. I do not like waiting turn 4 or 5 to do it. I want to do it the sooner the better, and I want to do it with as many units as I can. It's about dealing that devastating blow, because that one extra attack, it mounts up. When you got 10 brutes, that's 10 extra attacks. So you can really do a lot of damage with it. No, I love the war. It's fantastic. It's a staple. It's great.
Yeah, we'll just completely ignore the fact that I forgot to write once per battle in your charge phase. That was already there, folks. Do not pay attention. It's all good. Mitch, anything you'd add in regards to the war? Because it is a pivotal piece, right? It's once per battle. You know, you don't want to hold on to it too late because you'll miss your opportunity. At the same time, you don't want to do it too early and you don't get to reap the rewards.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Dave said. One thing with that, the add 1 to the attacks characteristic, you can just see it going further with, you know, a block of big brutes next to you, rather than let's say a gouger, for instance, a big pig. You know, you'll get more attacks. Essentially, if I'm going to be relying more on the war and planning around it, because it's in the list writing, right? Like if you're going to go troop heavy, that war's just going to mean a hell of a lot more. The add 1 to charge rolls is going to mean more for brutes than it will a faster moving unit. So I just think, you know, plan for it and build your list accordingly. Don't plan around it, because, you know, that's not really, you know, I don't think that's really clever, just planning around a 1-turn war. I never rely on, you know, any one rule to save me, but I just think, you know, if you are going to build into the war, it just goes further with some troops. That's all. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, agreed. Any final thoughts before we move on?
No, man, not at all.
It's a good ability. It's a good ability. You just gotta pull off the right time. And look, if someone charges you turn 1 and you just you know that you want to swing the battle, pop at the bottom of turn 1. But likely it's a turn 2, maybe a turn 3, depending on again the flow of the game.
Well, it is good if you're in line for No, don't hold on to it. If you're in line for a double turn as well, you know, if it's the bottom of a turn and you could potentially, you know, take a double. If you can war and you can do some damage, let's say not all the damage gets across and you're like, oh, that was a little bit of a smaller war than what I thought it was going to be. Having that potential second chance to just mop up the rest is really nice. So I've found personally that it's a little bit more effective on the chance for a double just because, like I said, you get that second chance to tidy up the shelves, so to speak, and move on with the game.
Cool. All right. Some good, interesting battle traits for us to play around with. Battle formations, huh? Now, I have seen a few of these become more popular than others. So you've got your Ironjawz Brawl, you've got your Grunter Stampede, you've got your Iron Fist, and you've got your Weird Fist. How do we rank them? I might start off first. Let's see if there's any commonalities. So, Dave, top to bottom, how do you rank them?
Oh my gosh. Me and Mitch have had many a conversation about this one, Tanya. So I think it's very much dependent on whether you want to be hard and fast or whether you're going to be like a slow brute army, right? I think that the 6-up ward is fantastic if you're running a slower army that is very centralized around brutes, because that 12-up ward becomes really, really relevant. If someone does 6 damage to you and you roll that 1/6, all of a sudden you have 1 brute that's dead instead of 2, so you have an extra 3 attacks. So that's sort of the way that I justify it over something like the natural disaster one, where you roll 8+ and you get an extra attack, which I think is probably then a close second. So, the natural disaster is if you roll an unmodified roll of an 8+, you get an extra attack on the melee weapons, which again excludes the companions, which is a downer. After that, I'd probably say smashing and bashing is next, because I feel like it allows you to save a CP for all our defense if you play it right, which I can talk to later on if you'd like. And then the worst one I think is the Grunter Stampede. Here we come. I don't really rate that one all that much.
All right, how
I
does
agree.
Mitch compare them? Stop
Yeah,
saying
look,
I agree. You're meant to be Gorkamorka.
No.
You're meant to conflict. You're meant to have different opinions.
Well, look, here's my different opinion. I think Dave said that Weird Fist is his go-to. I prefer to play fast, man. I love fast armies. I love it. I do enjoy the foot sloggers, but I'll always build into something a bit quicker. So I just think that the units that I want in my list, they're just going to outrun the wizards and the priests in the army. When I first read that you could potentially get your army on a 6-up ward, I was like, this is what I needed. Like, imagine having an entire army of pigs last edition with ward saves. It'd be ridiculous. So when I seen that, I thought, hell yeah, man, that's great. But again, I prefer to play fast. I prefer to play, pigs and gore grunters and things like that. Even the Mork crushers and Gordrak and things. So they'll just get out of range pretty damn fast of the wizards and the priests. If you are going to choose to run your Ardboys and your brutes and things like that, definitely the Weird Fist. But nah, for me, the natural disaster with the extra attack has got to be number 1. And then followed by smashing and bashing. Obviously, I think it's clear to everybody that smashing and bashing is definitely nerfed. It used to be that you could just, you'd wipe out a unit. Cool. You'd go over to the other side of the board. You'd wipe out another unit, and you just keep going down the line. But it is okay. It does have its benefit. You can save a CP and you can add 1 hit rolls. And when the army's hitting on 4s, if you come up against a list that's making you neg 1 to hit, any kind of source of a +1 is massive. But it just doesn't. It just doesn't overtake the ward save or the extra attack on the charge. So, yeah, the Grunter Stampede would be last. I don't really respect it too much, to be honest.
And if anyone cares,
I think the thing with
yeah, Dave, keep going.
Now, I was going to say the challenge that I've had with Weird Fist is that as soon as you're going for a charge, you're going to charge out of the 12 inches, right? So it's a very defensive stance. Whereas I think that the Ironjawz Brawl, I think, is a lot more of an offensive stance, which is kind of how I would position them.
Yeah, man, Dave, you're always playing defense. I'm always playing offense. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the challenge, Mitch, not to actually you, but obviously, just in case anyone's worried about this, you can't use pigs on Weird Fist because they're cavalry, not infantry. So, which makes that a little bit harder.
Cool.
But
Yep.
would have been
Yep.
would have been a great ability if you could. And for me to summarize, I'd probably say Ironjawz Brawl with Natural Disaster is probably my favorite, followed by Iron Fist close second. I think then a distant third is Weird Fist, although you have to really build into it, especially tapping into like Ard Boys and Brutes.
Yeah.
And then the Weird Fist, just that probably there's no weird. Sorry, the Weird Fist would be third, and then the Grunter Stampede is the fourth. I think we all agreed it's probably doesn't spark joy.
Yeah, and look, you're right about that Weird Fist too, man. I just see Natural Disaster, and I think extra attacks and charge. That's got me written. You know, I'm done. I don't need anything else. Just put it on the list, and off we go to war. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a little bit higher than average. The average on 2d6 is a 7. I like to gamble a little bit, being a destruction player, so I'm happy to roll. If it was a 9, I'd go, yeah, nah. But on an 8, I'm like, yeah, it's achievable, and it kind of puts the fear of of destruction into your opponents, thinking about some of these units getting a +1 attack, and it may completely change where they want to do their fight sequence, and the fact that again, it's based off a charge. Counter charge is a wonderful little ability for this one too.
Yeah, look, I think the one with the Natural Disaster too is that it's an unmodified charge roll. So originally when I read it, I was like, oh, I'll just lean into that. I'll lean into pluses to charge and things like that. But nope, it's they did put a ceiling on it, which was nice as well. Again, like I said, anything that can't be super abused, I'm all in favor for.
I mean, what's interesting though is that even though you can't add the +1 to charge, what you can do is, if the War Chanter gets 8 prayer points, and he can change the roll to a 3d6, and that does actually work with Natural Disaster or Ironjawz Brawl. Same thing with Kragnos, right? And I think that's where Kragnos has a lot of play, and we'll talk to Kragnos later on, I'm sure, but I think there's a lot of fun things that you can do with Ironjawz Brawl where you can manipulate how you get the 8+. So yeah, I agree, but I'm still a fan of Weird Fist.
I'm not saying it's wrong. It's still a good choice, but you've got to really build into it. I think it's the key. And it's probably not my personal style, but it has gone well. I've seen positive lists doing better, that more wins than losses with the Weird Fist. So if you like it, it's not a bad choice. Plays quite well.
Yep.
All right, next one up is our heroic traits. Same deal. You got Hulking Brute, an Eye for Throw to Fight, and Mega Bossy. Mitch, rank me 1, 2, 3, and give me a little why.
It's got to be Eye for the Fight. I guess the redeploy command is just, it always feels bad when you redeploy and you roll that 1. It just sucks. It just really, really sucks. What sucks probably just a little bit more is spending 2 CP for a counter charge and rolling the double 1. So yeah, I think anything to do with movement in a game of Warhammer is the most important. I've always said, like, my personal outlook on Warhammer is movement wins games. So what I mean by that is, let's say you have a model that does 1 trillion damage. It moves 1 millimeter. Well, it's not going to take objectives. It's not going to do anything pretty much the entire game. So I think movement wins games, and anytime you can squeeze more movement out of an army, it's I'm going to personally lean towards it for sure. It means that you're always going to be essentially going a minimum of 4, which is great. So like yourself and Dave were saying earlier, all of a sudden brutes now have a form of movement where they can get 3 in the hero phase. In your opponent's turn, you can squeeze out a 4 potentially, if not a 5 or a 6. So you can get those slow movers moving around the board pretty easy with I guess the traits and the little tools that we've got going for us. I'd probably say Mega Bossy would be next, simply because adding any modifiers to an army is always great. And then Hulking Brute, it's got to go off on an 8, and it's only D3, so I'd have to say that's last for me.
Dave,
I agree that an eye for the fight, I think it's actually very pivotal to the army that moves 4 inches, is that you can have a guarantee of 4. Anything with guarantees, right, in a dice game, I'm all for it. So for me, being able to do that 4 movement in my opponent's turn, it just makes their charge that little bit harder. You know, you couple that with my destroyers, all of a sudden it's like a, you know, potential 7-inch charge, you know. So it's sorry, 7 more to the charge. So I think there's a lot of play, there's a lot of tricky things that you can do with eye for the fight, which is why I definitely put it in, you know, in the first place. My second though is Hulking Brute, right? And this one, you know, I think Hulking Brute is really good actually with the Maw Crusher, not Godrak. I think Godrak, you obviously can't even take it, right? But with Maw Crusher, you know, specifically, you're in a position where, you know, Maw Crusher does mortal wounds on a charge to infantry, and then if you roll, you know, an A+ for, again, you can be dishing out a lot of mortal wounds before the fight even starts. Maw Crusher, you know, for me in AoS 3 was always designed to be an infantry killer. As soon as he got into combat with any level of hero, I just found he would whiff, right? And I feel like the way they've designed Maw Crusher now, I actually really like it. And I think that Hulking Brute just means that he has the potential to do, like, what is it, like 9-12 mortal wounds before the fight even starts. I think it's great. Mega Bossy, again, I'd want to charge rolls. I think it's really good, right? It's almost like a mini WAR where you get the extra, you know, charge. And the last thing you want to do is, you know, waste the CP because you rolled a double 1. You know, if you have something like that, you rolled 3 and you're automatically in if you're 3 inches away. So I'd probably put an eye for the fight, Hulking Brute, and then Mega Bossy in last.
Look, Hulking Brute's not too bad in the sense that if you have an army where it's active in every phase and it's doing damage in every phase, that's infinitely better. You know what I mean? Like, it means that you're getting damage across more consistently, and it's, you know, you're not just waiting for this one big phase to, you know, to try and dump all your damage. You're actually doing, you know, damage across the entire game in various phases, which is always good.
My picks for this, I think we all agree on an eye for the fight. The movement shenanigans, whether it's offensively or defensively, being able to redeploy onto an objective to steal it or to better position yourself to make a charge harder, to put something into potential combat zone if they charge you, then you might get a 2-for-1 with that repositioning. I think that to me is just too valuable, and there's just lots of great ways to use it. Then I think I tend to agree with, you know, Hulking Brute and Mega Bossy are both kind of at second level, both kind of very similar, depending on the build. I think personally, I'm probably leaning more towards Hulking Brute for the extra damage, because I guess with Mega Bossy, who's going to charge? What do I need to charge? How many charges do I need? Once they've charged, I need to be either out of combat and keep charging to really reap the rewards for Mega Bossy. I guess the same is true with Hulking Brute as well, but I think it depends on build for those two. But Eye for the Fight is the clear winner in my eyes, and I think all of our eyes.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. Eye for a Fight as well is really cool, because if you have, let's say, a unit in front of one of your massive damage dealers, you can essentially redeploy backwards into range of your damage dealer. So now your opponent's second guessing, do I really want to charge into that front unit? Because now, like, I was prepared to fight that, you know, that weaker front unit, but now all of a sudden you've got your damage dealer that's starting to get active when you want him to be active straight away to get that damage in early to try and get the upper hand in the game. So it's great. Like you said, Coach, it's got a million uses. It's got to be number one.
I will say though that the Mega Bossy combines really nicely with the WAR, right? Like when you call the WAR,
Definitely.
You've got to be within that 18-inch aura anyway. So like you're set up for the WAR, you pop Mega Bossy. We don't have to pop it, but like it's all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Potentially,
I mean,
that's the knockout. That's the knockout punch, Dave.
I mean, even you have like a war chanter, like a second war chanter that's not doing anything, all of a sudden you can give another +1 a charge onto another unit. So all of a sudden you can be on +3 to charge in a turn, you know, or if you want to do a counter charge, you can be +2, you know, if you put a War Chanter buff on him and then you put Mega Bossy on, all of a sudden your counter charges seem very likely to get in. So I don't hate it, but you know, it's a good mechanic, but an eye for the fight is still the best. I would never not take it.
Interesting at this stage of the conversation, where from where we started, where we were thinking about Ironjawz that mobile anymore. You know, if one of our most mobile, you know, units, which was Gore Grunters that did a lot of the damage, if they've kind of copped a nerf, where do we sit in this edition? And we're all of a sudden starting to see a million different movement tricks. That's why I rate Ironjawz. That's why I really, really enjoy them so much. So yeah, it's cool to see.
Indeed, it is. Artifacts. I wonder if you've got more diverse thinking here. So you got your trophy skulls, you've got your amber bone whetstone, and you got your armor of Gork. Dave, 1, 2, 3.
This one's an interesting one. I'm kind of, I think, look, trophy skulls is really good. I mean, having that extra 10 to the unit's control score. I originally, look, I was definitely all about armor of Gork, right? Having that guaranteed 6-up ward, right? But I feel the more I think about it, the more I'm liking the idea of trophy skulls, especially now that I'm playing more, because if you, for example, you do it with the redeploy of 4 inches and you have that on your Mega Boss on foot, all of a sudden you've got this guy snagging objectives that no one ever thought about. So I think trophy skulls for me has to be number 1. Amberstone whetstone, amber bone whetstone. I think it's okay. Maybe if you put it on like a Maw Crusher, I think it could be, you know, okay, but I think, you know, you're not going to win games with, you know, 1 rend, whereas I think with trophy skulls, adding 10 to the unit's control score, you know, you sort of start thinking about, you know, denying people getting their points, which is what I was saying about them being very Khorne-esque, right? Armor of Gork, I think it's fine if you don't want your general to die. You can just put that, you know, on a Maw Crusher, and all of a sudden it's like he's effectively got more wounds, right? But trophy skulls, I think, is for me number 1, and then armor of Gork number 2, and amber bone whetstone number 3.
Dude, I am so surprised that you said trophy skulls number 1. It's great. I thought you were going to go the other direction, man. Now I got to say, for me,
this is cunning. This is cunning but brutal.
That's right. Yeah. I'm the Gork head. I'm pretty much the oaf that just sees potential to do more damage, right? So I've got to choose the Emberbone Whetstone. You know, it just an extra rend, you know, goes a lot of the time you'll see, let's say the Maw Crusher or the Tusk Boss, and you know, they might have, you know, pretty low rend, and anything to get them across the lines a little bit better, right? At least for me, the way my mind works with Ironjawz is if I can get some damage across, perfect. And if you're slapping it on, you know, a big Tusk Boss or a Maw Crusher, you're going to be getting that damage across more consistently. So I'd probably choose Amberbone Whetstone, and then Armor of Gork. There's this nice little model called a Mega Boss, and you can give brutes an extra attack in a certain way. We'll go through that later, perhaps. But essentially, I'd want him alive to make sure he keeps dishing out those extra attacks again to get more damage across. And trophy skulls last for me. But I can certainly see the cunning approach, but I just go the other way with it. What do you reckon, Coach? What about you?
It's an interesting one. In other videos, I talk a lot about objective control, and I don't think a lot of players are leaning into objective control. So I love trophy skulls. I think for an elite army like Ironjawz, this plays nicely. I look at Amberbone Whetstone, and you guys talked about the fact that the Mega Boss on Maw Crusher is really good into infantry and not so good into heroes. I think the Amberbone Whetstone changes that, because all of a sudden you go from rend 1 to rend 2 with those 8 attacks, 4s, 2s, 2 damage apiece, where obviously you get the +1 rend if you're going into infantry, but into those heroes, those big heroes, rend 1's not going very far. So that Amberbone Whetstone is going to help. And then Armor of Gork, again, using the example of the Maw Crusher, that essentially gives you an extra 3 wounds on average. So it takes you from 18 to 21, just statistically, which might allow you to rally. It might allow you to, have 1 extra round of combat. I love my Gargants with a ward. Like, I always build my Gargants with defense in mind, because the longer I keep it on the table, the more damage it's doing. So I actually don't have a strong opinion on this one. I think all three have their place. None of them are bad. It's just what suits your play style and your list better. That's
Coach,
how
do
I'm thinking.
where I'm still, I think, scarred from 3rd edition. I remember Mega Boss and Maw Crusher. I'm gonna be charging him in. Why? You get the extra rend. You put Destroyer on him, and you roll all those ones. I'm just very scarred by all that.
You can tell. You can tell who's had it hard.
Listen, I play Gatebreakers. I know what it's like to roll ones, especially when we used to have 10 attacks. I'm pretty sure in one attack sequence, when I had 10 attacks, damage like Rend 3, damage 4, I rolled like 5 ones in a 10 attack sequence. So I get it. I get it.
The Gatebreaker with the forsake all your attacks and just roll 1 dice, and on a 4+ you can do 4d6 mortals. I've never rolled it to this day, never. And I won't stop. I'll just keep trying it. Yeah, it must feel good.
I've hit a Star Drake with 20 mortal damage now. Was it old Neferata who was like ethereal? I slapped her and you gotta roll. You gotta
never happened. Yeah. It never happened for me. It's always somebody else that tells the tales.
In Bathurst GT, this guy rolled a 4. He was jumping up and down. He was the happiest guy, and then rolled 2 1s and 2 2s.
That's me.
Great.
That's me with Kragnos on his charge. Like, I've never rolled anything better than a 1 and a something. Like, Kragnos always lets me down. Like Annihilators used to come down, I'd always fail the re-rollable 7-inch charge. So the Gatebreaker 4+ is like my reward for the Annihilators failing me all the time. Anyway, this is not the Stormcast. All the other Suns. It could be the Sun Show, but it's not going to be. We got spells. Now, this is an interesting one because we don't have to choose. We have a quite a decent spell lore. Not the best casters in the world. You certainly don't have it as a strength of your army. But that's also reflective on the fact that you've got 2 casting value 6s, 1 casting value 7, and all quite relatively nice ones. Obviously, having the great green hand of Gork brings additional mobility, always one that is a personal favorite of ours. But Mitch, how do you play around with spell? I probably should ask Dave, because Dave's the more sneaky one of us all. Dave, what's your favorite spell? We go to Dave first. What's your favorite spell and why?
I think the great big green hand of Gork that wins games straight up. I think it's really great. But Basham lads, when you have an army hitting on 4s and you have -1 to hit, you want to see those 6s. You want to try to increase the amount of attacks that you get. So I think, again, Basham lads I think is fantastic. It adds that level of reliability to something that can be very swingy. The great big hand of Gork is gonna get you onto points. It's gonna be, it's gonna, as soon as you start saying, hey, I've got a teleport to your opponent, all of a sudden they start playing cagey. I always think the threat of a teleport is better than the actual teleport itself. So I always make it known to my opponents, during deployment, oh, by the way, I've got a teleport. I've also cast Mighty Edbutt quite frequently, actually, in the last few games that I've played with Ironjawz. It does D3 damage. It's not anything crazy, but it's good. It's good. I don't mind it. It's a bit of something.
Yeah, I think the Basham lad spell's really, really cool. I think it's certainly just like the WAR with the extra attack. It just lends more to units with more attacks, right? So let's say if you've got 2 units of 10 brutes, the weird knob actually gets an extra spell if he's nearby more models, right? So because it's unlimited, what I'd probably look to do is I'd have 2 units of 10 brutes and a weird knob kind of in between them. you know, and I'd try and put that Basham Lad spell on each unit and send them up the board. Like Dave said, Hand of Gork's always been great, still great. It's just nice to get a tactic or two. It's, again, even if you don't use it in the game for much, it's just nice to have that threat. Anytime you give your opponent the option to make more mistakes, that's more of a chance to win, right? So, you know, Mitch has got a teleport. What am I going to do? Maybe I'll deploy like this, and all of a sudden he's made a mistake in his deployment. So, Mighty Headbutt's okay. I think it's very situational, though. Yeah, I'd certainly go for the Basham Lads as my number one spell here.
Yeah, straight up. I would
What were you
always
gonna
go
say,
for
Dave?
Basham Lads first.
Yeah.
You know, what I was going to say is like with Basham Lads, the only part about it that I'm not loving is the fact that it doesn't affect companion weapons. And companion weapons, like with the Tusk Boss, Gougers, all them kind of stuff, when you got those tusks, these are tusks that do like 5 damage, they're the ones that you want them to land. So that's the only thing about Basham Lads I'm a little bit bummed out about. But otherwise, it's a great spell. It's really good.
Yeah. That wholly within 9 for Hand of Gork's a little bit tricky though too. It's very easy to, you know, I wouldn't say that Ironjawz are certainly an army for players just, you know, starting to get into competitive play, but it's an easy mistake to make, I think, for anybody, you know, to maybe, you know, deploy your units, maybe not wholly within. It's just a tricky range. 9's a little bit tricky. 12's a lot easier. 9's just a little bit fiddly, I think. That's the only thing that I think is the downside to Hand of Gork. You've just got to really think about what you want to do and how you want to use it before you do it. What do you reckon, Coach?
I mean, well, just before, with the great big hand of Gork being 9 inches, that's a real limitation, right? Sorry, Coach, you're interrupting you.
Yeah.
9 inches, it's like a real big limitation. But what you can do, again, you can Mighty Destroys 3 inches into range. And that can, again, play with a lot of people. I know that you can't Mighty Destroyers after you teleport, which is, you know, crap, for lack of a better word. But Mighty Destroyers into the great big hand of Gork, I think, you know, effectively could make it 12 inches, you know, in terms of the bubble.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, that was my read.
Yeah, especially with some of those large bases, it can be easy not to be wholly within 9. Some food for thought, and I guess when I look at some of these rules, right, like for example, Basham Lads, I imagine a world where you cast that onto the Weird Brute Wreckers, and you have crit 2 hits. They all have 6 attacks each. That is an crazy amount of damage. If you have a reinforced unit of Weird Brute Wreckers, and we're worried about Nighthaunt with those, you know, all of those spooky ethereals, like that volume is going to clear house.
Yep. The best way to get around units like that with massive wound density and ward saves, just roll more dice. Simple. Just roll more dice. You'll get more chances for damage to go through.
Some other considerations I think about is Mighty Headbutt. There's a lot of endless spells running around, you know, Cronspine, Purple Sun, Gnashing Jaws, just to name a few. If it's a 5 or 6 wound idiot wizard, if you are able to headbutt them, you could possibly kill them. And then all of a sudden that Purple Sun, that Cronspine, that Gnashing Jaw disappears, even though, like, you know what I mean? Like, so all of a sudden, it's a significant threat piece to your opponent, and it'll make those little 5, 6 wound idiot wizards think twice.
Yeah, 18 inches, good distance. It's not bad.
It's a generous distance. And then to your point around the teleporting piece, it's always a psychological threat, and you see it all the time. You know, Gloomspite Gits has their own teleport, much more generous than yours, but it's always a psychological threat. And I always see it in my opponent's eyes is like, okay, I'm always going to reserve one of my dispels for this spell. So it means all of your other spells are going through because they don't want to. They want to make sure that you don't cast that particular teleport. So, depending on how many wizards you have in your army, you know, should you have a really powerful endless spell, should you have this, you know that the rest of your spells are going to go through without probably being touched, unless your army, your opponent has a lot of unbinds.
Yeah,
good point. That's just a couple of thoughts, but they're all good spells. They're all situational, but yeah, I mean they're not going to break the game, but they're all very useful in their own right.
Yeah, one of the best changes in this edition, I think, is the fact that, you know, one wizard can cast the whole lore. That's insane. That's great. It was very very limiting. It was very limiting before in the old edition when you'd have to kind of, you know, oh no, I've lost my weird knob and now my, you know, hand to Gork is dead, pretty much. It's nice to be able to, you know, always have that in the game, provided you've got obviously cast to do so.
And the same is somewhat true here with the Warbeats. Now, the Warbeats weren't prayers before, so you never really had a priest. But at the same time, you'd have your war chanter, and you'd have one of them. You'd only have one of these beats, right? So you'd often see people getting 2 or 3 war chanters in their list just to make sure they got multiple versions of the beat. Now you get all 3. So, you know,
Yeah.
get and beat, fix and beat, killer beat. So you've got a lot more variety. Magical intervention allows you to be doing this in the opponent's turn as well, which could be helpful. Mitch, I'll go to you first. Do you have a favorite?
It's got to be Killer Beat, Coach. It's got to be Killer Beat. I think what was cool about the changes to essentially the War Chanter giving out the damage, it used to kind of be auto. You know, you just pick a unit and go, yep, you've got the damage. I don't look at it as a nerf simply because what I was doing is probably much like anybody else, I'd always have to take 2 War Chanters to have 2 units buffed up. Now I can save some points because all of a sudden if the chanting rolls 8, you can pick 2 units. So I think it's good because I just get to save some points. So I get to add more of what I want instead of paying the War Chanter tax just to get some damage around the board. Fix and beat's fine. I would certainly put that last, not because it's bad. Any heals are good. I guess just because, you know, rally's awesome now. You know, you can rally your heroes and they can essentially get more wounds back. But get and beat's fine too. You know, again, it seems like we've got a lot of access to a lot of add 1 to charge rolls, which again, for a seemingly slow army where a lot of the top picks for our top units are in things like brutes and not gore grunters anymore. You know, they're awfully mobile, you know, for all of these plus the charges and the 4-inch minimum redeploy and things like that. So I'd say get and beat second and fix and beat third. What do you reckon, Dave? What's your read?
Well, I'm a little bit sad they got rid of the +1 a hit chanter. I used him all the time in AoS 3, but you know, further to your point, Mitch, killer beat, you know, you can't beat that +1 damage. One thing that I actually think is a really good change is like, you know, as an Ironjawz player, you generally before you were always saying, I want to give my opponents, you know, first turn, so I have a chance of getting a double. And sometimes you'd go up against people that just want to send it straight to your face. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, I wish I would have like +1 damage on, you know, whoever's getting charged into. Well, now you can with, you know, this new killer beat. So I don't mind the change. There is a bit of more thinking involved. It's not automatic with, you know, killer beat, you know, whether you want to get up to 8+ and then put onto 2 or just put it in. You have to definitely be more calculated. Fix and beat is something that I've been thinking about heaps about actually. Yeah. And before I was thinking, oh, there's just no point in having 2 war chanters. I think maybe 2 war chanters is maybe not a bad idea because, you know, if you've got, for example, you've got More Crusher, you've got the Primal Energies with, you know, the Emerald Life Swarm, you know, you put a bunch of, you know, I know you were talking about them before, the Weird Brute Wreckers with a 5/5 board and put them in as an honor guard so that you're -1 attack. And then you got Rally. All of a sudden, your Mega Boss, he ain't going to die. And there's no shot. There's just so much healing. Because over here, you know, we're doing D3+3, Emerald Life Swarm, another 3, -1 attack on a 3-up save, all that defense. I mean, chuck them in the enemy's face and see how that goes. But I reckon it'll be interesting, right? And I think get them beat, I think, is really good, especially against, you know, armies like Stormcast, where they can very easily now get you down to 1 dice roll for your charge. And the last thing that you want is to be, you know, 3 inches away from whatever you're charging and you're down to 1 dice and you roll a 1 or a 2, right? So I think that, you know, having 2 war chanters and being able to, you know, mix and match, you know, all 3 beats, I think it's a pretty decent, you know, toolkit. You know, leading up to this edition, I was like, great, 1 war chanter, kill a beat, put on 2 units, you know, go for it. But now I'm thinking the utility in having 2 war chanters, I don't think it's too bad. I'm liking the idea of it.
It just depends what list you want to write and what you want to make room for. If you've got room for 2 war chanters, absolutely throw them in. The fact that there's, there's these things called unlimited spells and unlimited prayers now, it's great. The fact that, you can pick 2 units out of 1. If you're going to take 2 war chanters, all of a sudden, you can potentially in one turn have 4 units at +1 to damage. So, yeah, man, it's how you write your list. It's great. I think what we're noticing is a lot of these traits and artifacts and things like that, you just, I guess, have an idea of how you want to write your list and just lean into it. Because there's something for everything. There's defense, there's offense, there's movement, there's extra damage. There's a lot in this book, and that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, I love the get 'em beat, for example, because I've talked a lot in this episode and many other episodes. I've been scarred many times with that failed countercharge. Getting those pluses to charge rolls, man. If I can get 1 or more pluses to charge, that becomes a much more guarantee. It's 50% of my CP on average, right? Like, assuming I don't have underdog or any other rule, I want as much guarantee as possible if I'm going to spend that many resources. Nice little ability, let alone hitting the 8+. And maybe I'm going to using magical intervention, banking up those extra dice to trigger that 8+.
Yeah.
The fix and beat, to your point, though, you mentioned the rally. Well, I don't have to rally. Or if I'm in combat, I can't rally. Boom, I've got fix and beat. I could double down with the Emerald Life Swarm, or I don't have to take that at all and go primal. I don't go morbid, or I go Cronspine. And then, and then killer beat is killer beat. Like, it's more. Who doesn't want more damage?
It's so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
Good choices. I think the only challenge, and before I get your favorite units, probably one thing I think probably frustrates me a little bit, and maybe you guys will tell me it's maybe my fears are a bit overcooked or not as relevant, is that every war chanter is increasing your drops. So, like, I'd love a world where a war chanter can go into a regiment like a support piece, but if you're adding 2 war chanters on top of Gordrak, a Mega Boss, a Maw Crusher, any other hero, you're really looking at a 3-4, probably closer to a 4 drop, which I don't know, like is drops that important as an Ironjawz player, given you can move in the opponent's hero phase? Any thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, the thing that I'm sort of starting to realize, because my wife just recently started playing Warhammer as well. And we've been practicing a lot at home, and I was telling her, the general rule of thumb is that you want to give your opponents first. And there's been quite a number of games that we've played, and going second hasn't been very advantageous, because I think it's very easy, especially with Ironjawz, to deny the first turn battle tactic. And all of a sudden, if they win the roll off and they give you and they take the double, they're going to be 2 battle tactics behind. So the more I'm sort of playing with Ironjawz and the more I'm thinking about it, and if you can sort of plan, your first sort of move, and again, it's going to be army dependent. If you're going up against Nighthorn where they move 6,032 inches in turn 1, then there's not much you can do about it. But I'm kind of leaning more towards taking first with Ironjawz nowadays. And that is probably more because I'm leaning away from the whole smashing and bashing mentality that Ironjawz generally had, and moving more into, this tactical denial sort of play style. Mitch, thoughts?
I think with these tactics that we've got now, I personally find them easy to score in this edition. So I don't think going second or first is too much of a bother with the kind of list that I write. Certainly going, second is fine, because you can see what your opponent does, and it gives you more information, so you can make more informed decisions about what you're going to do. But I think with these tactics in this edition, there's certainly, I guess, more opportunities to play very reserved in the first turn if you're forced to go first, or if you, whether you want to or not. There's an opportunity there just to play a bit more cagey in this edition, which I really like. So I'm not too fussed with going first or second. At least that's my opinion anyway.
I wonder if this is also playing into why piggies aren't that popular, because piggies need the charge. I mean, they become better when they charge, right? So if you're going high drops, the likelihood of you getting to dictate who goes first is certainly a lot lower. So if I've got piggies, I want to be charging. I might not get the choice. I might get double turned, and my opponent doesn't get their battle tactic. But I'm losing some of the power that I'm building into, because piggies aren't cheap, right? What are they? 3 for 190. So
yeah.
So and partially maybe that's why we're not seeing as many Gore Grunters on the table, or not doing as well, because the army style and the play style right now is much more about mobility, much more of a slower pace. And that's rewarding you in the Yard Boys, the Brutes, the Brute Ragers, the Wreckers, the hell. I'm seeing a lot more of those more Grunters on the table than I've ever seen before. I'm seeing people running 1, 2, sometimes even 3 of them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good read. I think that's actually, I'd wholeheartedly agree with what you just said, Coach. I think, it goes back to what I was saying about the changes to Mighty Destroyers, and did I think it was a nerf, or the big mortal damage in the game in the old edition was skyrocketing, and now all of a sudden it's just super common just to have D3. It's just the new rules interacting with the new books. That's all. I think it's fine. I think, it's all kind of settling nicely. At least I personally think that Ironjawz are settling nicely into the edition. Like, we've already, gone over a few different things, and we've seen how different you can play this army, and how many options you've got to get you out of trouble and pull off some tricks, or just dump a bunch of damage.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting one, and I hope I'm not being negative on piggies. Like, I know there are some people watching this loving their piggies, and I'm sure they can do well. The read that I'm getting right now is, if I'm going to invest into piggies, I'm probably not running a lot of them. I just think there's other parts of the book that is shining stronger right now, which is an absolute royal shame. But I don't know if it's a price point that's too expensive. It's a restriction on I don't quite know. I don't quite know. It just doesn't feel like they are as good as their other cavalry counterparts.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, maybe why people are leaning away from Gore Grunters. I mean, I'd certainly like them for their ability to score tactics, but they're not the go-to for the damage, because a lot of the rules in this edition now don't affect companion weapons, right? So you're not getting, all of those bonuses across onto, their other melee profile. And that's why I think you're probably seeing a move away from Gore Grunters.
Let's move towards some of our favorite units, and then we'll go into some of our lists. I'm going to pick first. I want to pick about our Gordrak.
No, Godrak's right. He's God tier. I love this boy.
Oh, that was a butchering of, like a Brangelina, where you mix two things. Like, partially I'm going to our cool boys Birdman. No, we've got Gordrak. So Gordrak, one thing that I'm noticing as well, and I think it's partially because the regiment options are much more flexible, is you're seeing a lot more unique heroes on the table, especially warlords, because you're only limited to one artifact, one hero trait, and that can go somewhere else. I wonder, and you're seeing more and more of them pop up. How are we feeling about Gordrak, the Fist of Gork, our named Maw Crusher? The points are relatively similar, if I remember correctly. They're Gordrak slightly more expensive, but only slightly. Do we like Gordrak?
I like him. I actually love him, simply because of two things. The main thing why I love him is, it goes back to what we were saying before. We've all had that moment where you have your big bad on the board and you charge him in and he just whiffs, right? He just whiffs. Whether he whiffs or not, he gets some damage across. He takes a slap back and potentially dies. With this rampage, it's really, really good. So he's anti-monster, he's anti-hero. I love him because all the big bads in the game are essentially monsters end heroes, right? Like you've got Be'lakor, Alariel, Nagash, Teclis, you know, Archaon, all of these things that you're kind of thinking, well, how am I going to deal with this? It's good because you don't have to rely on him wiping it out in one go, or he's going to get wiped out. Essentially, you can halve, you know, a melee profile, companion weapon, whatever. No, it's not guaranteed, but it's a chance, right? And it's certainly more of a 50-50 because it's on a 3-up, right? So he's just, you can be more liberal with him. You can be a little bit more confident in he's going to go into something and kill it. Or if he doesn't, he's going to be in combat with it and potentially, you know, pretty much come out on top. A lot of the time he will, because this is any combat phase. So it's, you know, if you're rolling hot, whether or not you're rolling hot or not, he's got the extra wounds now. We love his 3+ save. I think he's very valuable for going into those big things that you just want dead, right? The normal Mork Crusher doesn't have that anti-hero, anti-monster kind of thing. So for me, he's always included in any kind of list I run, just because I need something to take out those big problems. And then obviously his WAR ability, which is going to add 1 hit roll. So you can potentially have the majority or all of your army getting the +1 to hit rolls, which is going to be hitting on 3s, not 4s. So if you're coming up against an army where all of a sudden your Ironjawz are hitting on 5s, it doesn't matter how many attacks you've got, or damage buffs and things like that. It just sucks. It just sucks hitting on 5s, right? But you know, you can obviously improve that to a 4. But in an ideal world, you're hitting on 3s, and that's fantastic. So I just love him. I just love him for those 2 reasons. What about you, Dave? Do you reckon he's worth taking, or do you not?
Yeah, I love him. Yeah, I was very much like tossing and turning whether or not I liked him, but I think I just decided that I do like him, and it's actually for the same reasons as what you mentioned, Mitch. Right? Like I remember when I first saw Monster Grapple when when Ironjawz preview came out, like I don't know how 3-4 months ago, whenever it did, and I saw it, I'm like, oh, this is shit. Like I don't care for this. But now that I've played a couple of games and I'm seeing, like Archaon, I'm seeing Be'lakor, Alariel, everyone who you were saying, right? He's got some real value, right? And all of a sudden, you're potentially halving the amount of tax on what could potentially be one of their bigger attacks, right? And then you got a potentially, a war chanter behind him, healing him 3 plus D3 or 3 plus D, 3. All of a sudden he becomes like a real tanky piece. And the fact that he's a 3-up save now is so much better than being that damn 4-up save it was all last edition that just real hurt. But look, Monster Grapple aside, which I think is great, it's not the reason why I take him. The why I take him is the +1 to hit on the WAR. I just think that for an army that hits on 4s, having your whole army on that one turn, hitting on 3s, and then you can do all that defense if there's any sort of negative debuffs. I think he's if you want to run a Mork Crusher-esque kind of guy in your army, he becomes like a really big tool where there's multiple uses for him. He can tie up big monsters. He can buff up your guys. He hits pretty hard. It's just a shame that the War Chanter buff doesn't buff the companion attacks, and the WAR doesn't increase the amount of attacks on the big thief's fist and tail. But you take the good with the bad, I guess. Coach?
Yeah. No, look, I think it's a good unit. I think I wouldn't say Gordrak is an auto include, because when you look at, for example, like if I need something that's going to absolutely crush an opponent, I want that big centerpiece model. You are blessed and have access to Kragnos, right? Kragnos, is I wouldn't say similar value. It's a little bit more of an investment. But what you get is, the fact that you've got there's a 3d6 charge, right? I'm not making that up. You get the extra dice roll. You get, some significant heavy damage. You've got some really interesting spell shrug abilities. You've got a lot of things here. So would I say Gordrak is auto include? probably not. I love some of the synergy that you both recommended. I also don't think Kragnos is auto include as well. You know, it's a little bit more expensive. You get the 5-up ward, you get 2 less wounds. It's not as synergistic as Gordrak, but you could run both. If you are a Suns player like I am and you love running big toys, you could run both. I guess again, pick, you know, if I think about like, you know, the brute rages or the brutes being able to slingshot them 3d6. Oh my gosh. So either way,
You know,
I dig it. They're both good options.
What's something interesting about Kragnos that took me a little bit by surprise that he didn't have this in the last edition is he's got the Ironjawz keyword in it, which means that he is going to soak up all the potential buffs that our army gives. So if we're calling the War, he's going to benefit from the +1 attack on all the profiles. The War Channer is going to be increasing his damage output by the additional 1. Even if you want to do that Basham lads where you know, he does exploding 6s on the, you know, other 2 attacks, you know, all of a sudden this guy becomes a real big soak for potential buffs, and he would slap. And given 3d6 charges, you can give, you know, a whole army plus, you know, 1 attack if you take that battle formation. I actually think if he wasn't a 4-up save, I'd be he wouldn't be auto reclude, but he'd be close to it for me. I think he's got real legs. But that 4-up
5-up
save,
ward though. But 5-up ward.
The 5-up ward is good, right? The 5-up ward is good, but I don't know, the 4-up save, when you have a world where there's long strikes that can just shoot him off, you know, it's a little bit like, especially because he's a War Master, and when people have long strikes, they're going to put him in that General's Regiment +1 a hit, +1 a wound. They're going to be slapping Kragnos around. So I think 5-up ward I think is really good, don't get me wrong. But the 4-up save, I think that hurts because he is a War Master, which, yeah.
You know what? I think what's cool and what we can probably all agree on is it's actually awesome being able to talk about, you know, models like Gordrak in this edition. You know, you never seen him last edition, and all of a sudden, nothing is auto-include. You've obviously got your favorites, but what is cool is that we can actually have a chat about all of these models and actually say, well, we can play him. Is he worth playing? Is he not? Rather than just tossing him straight in the bin. You know what I mean? That's what's really cool, I think, about this edition and a lot of these War Scrolls.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
people are making it work too. A lot of people making it work. It's been great.
And we've seen a bunch of lists. I think I saw some Nova lists lately where the Kragnos was the centerpiece. And actually, did Aaron Newborn? I think Old Town Throwdown. I think I checked the list. I think Aaron did run a bunch of Kragnos, a Kragnos, and a bunch of reinforced brute rages and or, you know, weird brute wreckers. So it was just all these bunch of like six models, and with that 3d6 charge, just slinging them across the board. They've been buffed up, call the War, and the mobility, the damage. If you get those, you know, exploding 6s or any other type of thing, you probably do, you know, crippling damage that they can't come back from. So but again, like, you know, there's a lot of different styles that you can tap into, which is again wonderful. And we've also got this mega boss here on the Mork Crusher, who is also decent. Like, it's not a bad option. You get the customization ability, you know, without going through all the War Scroll. How do you think the Mega Boss or Mork Crusher, if I was going to take one of them, let's say I only had enough points for one of these models, is my preference Gordrak, or save 30 points and take the Mega Boss or Mork Crusher and have a bit more of a customizable hero? I might go to Mitch first, given that he is the brutal but cunning.
Well, this is actually a conversation that Dave and I had a couple of weeks back, and I was writing a list, and this is exactly what we spoke about. I could have put a Mega Boss on Crusher in there, or Gordrak. It just really depends on what your list needs, I think. I don't think either of them are auto-include. I think you just need to really think about your list. So when I said movement wins games, this Mork Crusher's got the 2d6 pile-in. That's massive. Like, if you can maneuver a model into something that you can actually hit and get some damage across, it's fantastic. you're essentially, slingshotting him across the board. You can charge into something, and essentially, like, let's say your opponent puts in front an endless spell. You can charge an endless spell and then pile it 2d6, towards, what you need, kind of thing. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're doing it by the book, but it allows your damage to get to where it wants. It's obviously an infantry killer, but I personally think, for me, again, Gordrak is my go-to out of the two, because Gordrak's role for me is to hunt those big bads, those monsters and those heroes. And I've got, a massive unit of buffed up brutes to be standing on points and smashing into infantry. I mean, if your opponent's going to be sending infantry into brutes, a lot of the times they're not going to be able to take the point off you, because brutes have a nice cheeky rule that allows them to kind of stay dominant on points. But the way I personally play and the way I write lists, I'd probably choose Gordrak. But again, it's just whether you need him to fill that role or not. Dave, where did you land on it? Did you vote for the Mork Crusher? What did you say when we were having that chat?
I think I landed on the Gordrak only because we don't really. I feel we don't really need more infantry killers. We've already got that in other units, right? Whereas I think that Gordrak has a very specific role that army potentially doesn't really have, in the sense that he can cut down the amount of attacks that someone else does, and the +1 to hit. I think he does more for the army than what Megaboss or Mork Crusher does. Is kind of like what I'm leaning towards. But people think it's a detriment, right? That the Megaboss has a dinner plate for a base. But the benefit of that is that if you give him the command tray, whatever it's called, where the redeploy gets issued out to units wholly within 12 inches, he covers a lot larger surface area, right? So he's really good in that way, and that's something that Gordrak can't do. I think that the smash through the 2d6, because it is technically a pile-in, I think there are a lot of limitations with it. Mork Crusher being 6.1 or so inches wide, the dinner plate. If you want to fly over a screen, you need to be rolling at least like a 9+, because it's very situational. I think Gordrak overall has more utility, which is why I would take him over Mork Crusher.
I think if you're going Mega Boss or Mork Crusher, you're going all in. You're giving it the artifact, you're giving it the command trait, you're giving it the +1 rend, and you're giving it the redeploy. If you're not willing to invest both of those traits, those abilities into the Mega Boss, I think you're much better off with Gordrak. I think I tend to agree, but it's definitely still a solid unit. But you've got to invest, because you're right. I don't feel like I need the anti-infantry. I do want an anti-monster, anti-hero stuff. Thus why I have to put the artifact on the Mega Boss or Mork Crusher.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, in the old edition, that's pretty much why everybody lent into the Mork Crusher, right? Because you had that artifact destroyer, which once per game you could, add 3 to your damage, and you just go into a massive unit of 20 or whether it was 40, models, and just clean them right out. If you're going to be taking the Mork Crusher, you're going to be putting some artifacts on, but there's not that go-to destroyer big damage artifact anymore. And again, it just depends on what your role needs to be, right?
All right, let's pick some favorite units. I might get, let's do 2 units, or maybe a hero and a troop, or let's pick some things. Dave, give me one. What's one of your favorite units we haven't spoken about yet?
I think brutes. I think I can't right now. I think that brutes are just so good. I mean, I wish that brutes had this profile in the previous edition, right? I mean, you look at this like a 3-up save. I mean, you reinforce them. You're talking about 30 wounds and a 3-up save. You put them behind, the weird fist. Give them a 6-up ward. It's going to be rough. In the list that I wrote before, I've got 2 units of reinforced brutes, but I'm thinking maybe even MSU, might be the way to go, because they're passive. You messing. Enemy models with a health characteristic of 1 or 2 cannot contest objectives while they are in combat with this unit. Like that's game winning, right? Especially if you can Mire Destroyers, redeploy, whatever it is, right? onto a point, all of a sudden you become this threat. And I remember when I first saw the brutes, I'm like, oh yeah, 3 attacks, but everything's sitting on 4s. I was a bit like, blah, it doesn't sound great. But you can really stack buffs. You can stack buffs on these guys like crazy. So, you can put the Mega Boss on foot, can give him an extra attack. He can do that on a 2+ in the hero phase. He can do on 3+ if he's in combat and if he attacks first. You can give him exploding 6s as well, where extra hit on 6s, and you can also call the war on them. So all of a sudden, you can get these bad boys up to 7 hits, right? 7 attacks, which is outrageous. And it's all fun and games, right? When you're saying, oh, I've got 70 attacks on this reinforced units. Everyone's like, oh, 70 attacks. Oh, but you're hitting on 4s. But then you tell them, oh, by the way, they're buffed with the war channel, so they're actually 3 damage a pop, and the special attacks are actually 4 damage a pop. So it's like, okay, great. I can be hitting on 5s, but if I get, 15 or 10 attacks through, you're still talking about 30, 40 damage, right? So I just think brutes, like I call them, they're like little Mike Tysons. Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the head, right? So it's they're very hard hitting. They're very resilient. Yeah, they're slow, but I think we've talked about that a lot there, where they can be sneaky fast. So I've leaned towards brutes a little bit more in this edition. But I'm starting to think, maybe 70 attacks doing, 3-4 damage a pop might be overkill. So potentially it might be overkill. I was doing like 50, 60 damage to Gargants in the last GT. It was fun. But I'm thinking maybe, like 5, units of 5 brutes might be enough. So I'm still very much in the experimental phase of writing lists, but every unit has game, every unit has play, and I think that the list potential from Ironjawz, I think there's a lot that people haven't sort of figured out yet, and I think that brutes play a really cool part in that.
Mitch, any closing thoughts on brutes?
Yeah, I've got to say that I love them. I have to. They're awesome. What I think is really cool is that they fill multiple roles, right? So whenever I'm thinking about putting together a competitive list, I'm always thinking, I guess, what's their job? Why am I including them? Am I including them just because I like the look of them? Chances are no. If it's a competitive list, they fill multiple roles. So with that, they've got a better save now. They're wound dense. They can hold objectives. They do a hell of a ton of damage. They can be buffed up. They synergize so well with a lot of heroes. So yeah, I just think brutes are amazing. It used to be I'd include Ard boys and to stand on points, and I'd choose Gore Grunters to get buffed up by a War Churner and send them in. But again, Ironjawz have just been turned on their head now, and we've got to think differently now. And I think brutes are great because you don't have to pay the Ard boy tax just to have units stand on points with the better save. Ard boys used to have essentially the best save in the book. And now there's a lot of 3+ saves going around, and instead of 4s and things like that. So brutes are great. They do the damage and they hold the points, and they're very survivable, especially if you're like Dave and you want to get a bit cunning and play a bit more reserved and go in a weird fist and have that 6-up ward. Like a unit of 10 brutes with all that defense with a 6-up ward on a point, I don't think you're moving them. You're going to at least have to commit a lot of resources to moving them. And even if you don't, they're going to hit back, especially if they've got that damage buff on them and the extra attack. So they're kind of like a jack of all trades at the moment, it seems like. At least, that's how I've played them in the games that I've played with them. They can do everything, and they're really reliable. So yeah, I love them. I love them to death.
All right, I was going to add one small point, and then I'll get Mitch to pick a unit. One thing that really works in Brute's favor, especially, obviously this is true for all of the Ironjawz, but especially for Brutes, is the combat zone now. In the past, what were you like 2-inch range? So, reinforcing a unit of Brutes, for example, you would never get your 10 attack, your 10 models in range. Now you're basically going to get your max potential, and that's really where the volume and significant damage comes out. So I think the combat threat bonus has really benefited the brutes.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. Look, one of my
Yeah.
favorite units is probably the Morgrunter Gouger, the humble Morgrunter Gouger, I think.
Mm.
You were saying earlier, Coach, that you're starting to see a lot of people run some of the bigger pigs, and I think what I noticed in this edition, I've played, you know, a handful of GTs now and some one days as well, and what I was noticing was there's so many armies at the moment that have access to strike first, strike last kind of things, right? I think this edition is I guess focused on a lot of things, but one of the things that I've realized it focuses on is, I guess, how would I word it? The way in which combats are done, right? So how you're going to be resolving combats, who's got strike last, who's got strike first. If you can control the combat, I guess it just means that you're in a better position, right? So, you know, you're charging into Be'lakor, and all of a sudden there's 3 units that are fighting potentially before you. My twin brother Christian, he's a lover of death for a long time, player for a long time. He's very, very good. He can handle himself, and you know, Ushoran's, you know, able to make everyone, you know, fight last around him potentially. So I love that these gouges are included in this book, because it gives Ironjawz that access to, you know, controlling fights and where you want things. So the way that gouges will work, they got to change it. It's a great change. It used to be momentum points, right? Momentum points used to generate depending on how you use them, right? So you could essentially run them around. They generate 2 points. If you charge in, you know, you get an extra point. Up to a maximum of 3, right? So they're on their Morgrunter's Tusk, they're going to be 2 damage. If you play it right and you've got 3 momentum points, essentially that's 5 attacks at 5 damage, which is massive. They're like mini Durthus running around the board, right? But what's cool about this is that you can essentially commit multiple resources to one really, really big unit. And I'll go back to what I was saying about death armies, right? With a block of 10 hex wraiths, or, you know, the massive, massive trouble units, that how do you chunk through them with all of those wounds and all of those wards? You can potentially charge one of these gouges in, give it strike last, and be able to dump all your damage from all your units on it and make sure that it disappears. So you're not playing that death game where you charge into a unit and then for 3 turns you're just standing there watching them come back and essentially whittle you down to a point where you can't, right? Because Ironjawz don't really have recursion. So what I really like is this gouger. I love the Morgrunter gouger. That strikes last is awesome. And especially because of the points, it just means that you can run multiples of them. So you do have the potential to get a strikes last where you need it and where you want it and how you want it. So yeah, I just, obviously they need a little bit of finesse to play them right. I certainly wouldn't send them in without max momentum points, because it's just going to be a wet noodle fight. Like 5 attacks at 2 damage it's not great. It's not great for the points. You know, I'd rather take brutes for that. But yeah, I really like that we have access to controlling combats this edition, because it just seems like so many armies have it. And if you don't have it, you're just at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you'd add, Dave?
I love, you know, if like similar to what Mitch was saying, if you play them right, like the way that I played with them is I keep them behind my brutes, sort of like if you think like a triangle kind of thing. So I've got my brutes up here, I've got my gouge on one side, and I've got my other big unit of brutes on this side. So whichever way they charge, I'm going to be able to be countercharging with someone. And you know, if I run and then counter charge, they're going to be on 3 momentum, and they're going to be rolling. I'm pretty sure it's a 2 up strike last. So all of a sudden they're charging me, I'm counter charging, and they're fighting last. And when you're swinging brutes into them, you know, things are going to die. So I think gouges. If Mitch didn't say them, I was going to say gouges. I think they've got serious play in this army.
And the funny thing is, on the app, I was ready to talk gouges. Like I'm like, right,
nice.
waiting for my time.
Look at us. Look at us. 3
waiting
peaks
for my
in the pod, hey?
One thing I'll add to the gouger conversation, then I'll get Dave to tell me another unit, is having 1 or 2 gouges on a flank, you know, 1 on each side. One, great way to score, take the flank. But 2, there's not a lot of units that can handle a rampaging gouger on a flank without committing a solid hammer piece. a monster hero, one of your critical, damage dealers. And if you ignore it, it's just going to run through the backfield. It's just going to annoy the absolute hell out of you. It's survivable. It's fast. It has good movement. It has some interesting abilities. It obviously has a strike last. So if I was going to run a list, I'm probably maybe running 2 of these, just to be honest. Maybe I'm a little crazy, but I like the idea of 2.
Coach, dude, I'm just sitting here smiling because you're saying everything that's in my head and what I wanted to kind of spill the sauce on a bit later when we get in the list. But you're
exactly a Suns player.
Right.
Like I think we're on the same way as Suns players. We understand.
Yeah.
There's a wavelength.
Absolutely.
Simple brain.
Yeah.
Simple brain. We like to stand on circles and we like to run forward.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it.
I mean, literally exactly what you said is like words out of Mitch's mouth to me when we were building lists. He goes, "Yeah, people have to throw something into them. Yeah, otherwise, Gouger's going to eat them up. They're great." Yeah.
You have to commit something, right? So you have to commit a big block to killing them, because that 12 wounds and that save and that damage, you just have to, and that means that's more time that they're not standing on points, right? And especially because a lot of the faster units in the game that are being run in smaller units, they can actually handle, right? Like, if someone's going to run Vanguard, they're essentially, you're going to see them a lot. They're going to put them in a unit of 6, and they're going to be the damage dealers that are going to go up and try and get on the points and wipe out your hammers and your anvils and things like that. But a lot of the time, like let's say you're playing against somebody as ogres, they're just going to send frost sabers on the flanks. Cool, the Gougers are just going to wipe those out and then move along and start generating some momentum points as they're doing that, and then move into the middle and dump all their damage. It's good. It's really good.
And also, just on that point, and then I want to pass it to Dave, is this might be a great way to handle those Vanguard. You sacrifice that 220 points to take the charge, or maybe you go in and just like body block, redeploy, just be annoying, and then save your really good juicy stuff to then go in and fight them. Or if you've got 2, if they've used their double fight, or you get to charge them back, go in for the strike last. So there's some interesting play there. It's just a shame that the Hacken crew is 50 points extra. I don't think there's 50 points extra value in this. Oof. Or was that a spicy hot take?
We'll get into that a little bit later, but I'm not going to say I disagree. I certainly don't disagree at all. I think paying for the Hacken crew has a really cool rule, but it is situational, right? So some games you might get your points out of it, and sometimes you won't.
Is it 50 points cool? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
correct.
It's a 3-up save as well, which is something that's a little bit more sturdy. So one thing that I found, which was different when I chucked, a Gouger and the Hacken crew to the sides, people want to shoot them off. People want to chuck stuff into it. The Gouger, would die if they put, I went against Stormcast for a game and he just chucked long strikes into the Gouger. It was a non-issue. My Gouger just died. Whereas this guy, he was around, you put, an all-out defense on him, and, I think that he holds the flanks a lot better. And I think that's where he really shines, is on the flanks, because, you get in on someone, and whether you kill them or not is beside the point, because you can then carve the path and move into whatever it is that you want to. So I think that he's harder to pin down. I think this guy was built for the flanks. He's insane.
I just think that if you're doing 2 of them, you're now looking at 600 points roughly. Like it's a big investment. I think if I'm taking the Hacken crew, I'm taking 1. But if I want to run 2, I'm probably going non-hacking crew. I'm just going Gouger. But I see your point. 3-up save is really good. I just don't know if I can justify having 2 of them on the flank.
Yeah.
And then adding like a more crusher, because now I'm over 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
All right, Dave, last favorite unit, and then Mitch, last favorite unit. Then we're getting into lists. Mitch, Dave first. What's your next favorite?
You know what? This might be maybe a little bit controversial, because I've listened to many videos about Ironjawz and people don't like him at all. But I think I think Mega Boss on foot. I think if you look at his war scroll is very like, you look at it and you're like, it's like he hits whatever, he can hit whatever. It's not much of a thing, but he buffs your dudes with a very reliable 2-up, right? And gets an extra attack. So, brutes having 4 attacks as opposed to 3 makes a big difference. That's an extra 10 attacks, right? But I think, I'm very much about the utility, and, he's someone that can hold on to the, that trophy skull where he's now all of a sudden worth 12 control points, right? And he can also do that 4-inch redeploy. So I feel like in terms of the way that I'm thinking about running Ironjawz, he adds the utility, and he's a great candidate for the 4-inch redeploy, because he's the one who's going to be going up with the brutes. He can go off on his own, and he can cap objectives. He can hold his own. He's got 8 health, which is, not a small amount of health, but he's on a 3-up save. And, again, he can hold his own. He's got, a lot of damage, and he can soak up buffs as well. So I think with the traits that you can take on him, I think that he can be sneaky good. I think he can be, real cunning, right? Because he ain't brutal. He ain't doing much damage, right? But he definitely adds that, something to the army that I don't think people would expect. His war scroll is very, it's all right. But I think the +1 attack, I still haven't really worked out the reaction. You declared a fight ability for this unit, and then on a 3-up, you get another attack. I feel there needs to be a change. If they made that, you get to fight immediately with another brute, he would be the best unit in the book. But his reaction ability, I haven't worked it out. He might be working good with a gouger. But I feel like there's something there, and once I figure it out, I think he'll be awesome. But yeah, in terms of the utility he brings, I'd probably put him up there, definitely.
Yeah, I think with this Mega Boss, I'm surprised that people, again, I'm surprised that people are saying that, Ironjawz or certain units might not be that good, but I think the Mega Boss isn't one of them. I think he's great. What I think the Mega Boss is tricky with is, like you said, Dave, it's about essentially he needs to fight, right? Just so he can get his, additional attack buff off. But if I was going to run that and I was planning to do that, that's where I would put that artifact, that 6-up ward. I would actually put it on him.
Yeah.
Just to make him more survivable. If I'm going to lean into that, I can make him more survivable. You can potentially charge a gouger in and get that unit to fight last, and then you can have the Mega Boss and the brutes attack. So I just think that if you're going to go with that Mega Boss, it probably requires a little bit of finesse to really get it to work. It's not as auto as, like you said, he attacks and then another brute unit next to him attacks. It's not that easy. But yeah, I think he's okay. I think he's a good war scroll. It just depends how you want to write your list, really.
The Mega Boss suffers. The Mega Boss suffers from 3rd edition artifact. That destroyer artifact. That destroyer artifact set the baseline of what people think and believe a Mega Boss on foot can do.
Yeah.
When you peel that back, even if you played a Mega Boss in the past without that artifact, and nobody did, you would realize it's okay. Like, it's a fine war scroll.
Yeah.
If you're investing in brutes, like Dave's talked a lot about, obviously it adds so much value. Your challenge is that you've got a lot of great heroes that are very expensive, and something has to give. By taking this Mega Boss on foot, you're probably sacrificing that second war chanter that we've talked about. It could be the points difference between going from a Mega Boss on Maw-Krusha to Gordrak, or even a Kragnos. So I guess it's like, where do you invest your points? And I feel like a Mega Boss is nice to have, but maybe not necessary unless I'm building into brutes.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree. Totally agree.
If it had the head stomper rule where it could join another battalion, I'd probably much more enjoy it. But only the Ardboy Big Boss has that rule. I think that would allow me to reduce my drops, and I think that would change the value of the Mega Boss on foot for me.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Coach, it's a new edition. And I think once people start to settle into this edition and really see it as a whole, and how much damage has been increased or reduced, or rules have changed or not been changed, he's not a bad foot hero. Like, he's actually not. Like, that many attacks with 2 damage is fine. The fact that he's got that save, you can make him more survivable, and that, like, the fact that he's giving out those buffs is okay as well. It's just settling into things, right? It's just understanding how he sits in the current, game state.
Two of the abilities are relying on the brute keyword. So if you're not touching brutes, then it's not valuable. It's not the Higgs missile that it used to be.
Yeah, you're probably getting sick of me saying, but it's just all about how you write your list and getting that overall picture of what you want it to look like and what it's going to do, and just build into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
If I can shout out one more unit, Coach.
Yeah. Last pick then.
Surprisingly, maybe to you, Dave. I want to shout out the Gore Grunters, man, because we've said our piece that they're not too good.
I was thinking the same, I agree.
Oh, shout out to the Gore Grunters. If you've listened this far to
I was waiting for you to say, Mitch.
Good on you, the people's champion. All right, talk us about Gore Grunters. Look, I don't hate them. It's just hard. It's hard to love them right now.
It is, and that's exactly right. It's hard to love them in this game state because they just cop such a change, right? Honestly, though, you've already mentioned a couple of the things, Coach. It's like a lot of the time you're going to have a cavalry unit on the flanks trying to score those early tactics, and these guys have got anti-cavalry. When I first looked at it, I'm like, why are Gore Grunters good, or how are they even playable? There's a few different tactics first turn that's great that brutes would certainly struggle with, and if you don't want to pay all of the points for a gouger, if you don't have them, Gore Grunters are obviously the next go-to movement-wise. They've got anti-cavalry, going back to what I was saying, so they're going to be getting that access to their 2 rend again. They used to have 2 rend up top. They're going to be getting that, but more so, they're just good for screening, for tactics. If you're going to take the center and you want 2 units, am I going to be happy to sacrifice 2 units of Gore Grunters in the middle of the board if they're going to get wiped out next turn for some tactics? If I'm going to be running that 4-inch redeploy, cool, maybe one of them doesn't die. I think they have play. I guess you need to know what you're going to do with them. What I would do with them is I would be certainly trying to get flank tactics, or I would be trying to get, take the center or to screen. So let's say if somebody doesn't commit something to the side, they can then move up and try and do, take their land and get a terrain tactic. So look, there's 4 different uses for them that I just mentioned. I don't think a unit that has 4 uses, I don't see it as bad. I just think, okay, is it not as good as what it was before? Yes, I'll agree. It's not as good. But no, I think if I'm writing a list and I see a unit that can potentially do 4 things, if not more, I'm happy to take it. I'm happy to make room for it if I need it. I guess brutes hit hard. They've got awesome saves. You can give them a 6-up ward, but they are going to move up the board. With all of their movement tricks, they are going to be a little bit slower than Gore Grunters. So I just like Gore Grunters for that reason. They're fast. They still have their use. Whether something is better than them, cool, that's a different conversation. But all I'm saying is Gore Grunters have play. We've seen Scooter recently go, I think it was 6-2 in the States at Nova, I believe it was. And he was running reinforced unit of these guys, and I think maybe a unit of 3, and they've got play. Like I said, like if you can send 6 of them, that's a massive wound density, right? That's 30 wounds at a 3-up save, 2+ with all out defense. If you can land on somebody, you've got power through tricks, or you've got that 3-inch Mighty Destroyers move, you can potentially pin your opponent or certain units in their deployment zone nice and early, so they're not able to score first turn if they haven't even set up for the take their flank tactic. So they've got a use. They've definitely got a use. It just depends on where and how. What do you reckon?
If you have like 6 Gore Grunters, you just string. I think you're right. I think they have a place in the army depending on the list that you build, which seems to be the common thread in this whole conversation, right? But if you have 6 Gore Grunter pigs and you just string them out all the way, you're going to be able to cut off a whole section of the board where your opponent isn't going to be able to go into, right? And that's 30 wounds with a 3-up save. They're going to have to chew through that, right? Then if they start knocking your guys down, you can be tricky again, and you can move the Gore Grinders off the table, and then it's their turn. You might destroys back into them, and then you go, sorry, you're tied in again. So I think with such a large footprint, potential footprint, and you'll be able to really string them, across the map, I think you can cut off really large sections of the board. And then moving 9, I don't think it's anything to scoff at. I just think that, similar to what you were saying before, Coach, right, is that people always think of the mega boss on foot with Destroyer as this little missile that will go in and wipe something mega, right? I think that, very similarly, Gore Grinders have a very different role in the army to what they had. And I think that, people just have to get their head around about the best way to go about using them. But by no means are they a bad unit. I think that they are a different looking unit. And when played right, I think that they have, they have a role in the army.
Dave,
and
let's not
it's
forget
probably, I
too,
think, more
right? Like,
orientated towards
if they're going to
control.
do a take their, take the flanks tactic, they can essentially swing up, tag that 6-inch, because you don't need to be wholly within 6 anymore. So you can tag that 6 and an objective. And if you have a unit that's taking an objective and filling out a tactic in one turn, that's amazing. That's perfect. You're not having to commit 2 units to doing 2 different jobs. One unit that's able to do multiple things is always worth a look, at least a look, if not taking.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like I said, you can always take their terrain piece after that. It's like you've got, essentially 2 tactics and a point just with one unit, without needing to do much or think about much about it. They've got play, definitely.
Yeah.
To add my 2 cents, and then we'll move to lists. Dave, you've nailed it. You've said what I was going to say, and that is I feel like the role may have changed. The fact that they've got the 3-up save, the anti-cavalry, I almost feel like they're meant to, their role has changed. They're no longer the crazy damage. Obviously used to be able to countercharge and fight and like all the extra shenanigans. That role has changed. It's now almost like Chaos Knights, where they can be a really good tar pit, lots of wound density, a lot of board control. The 3-up save, they're super durable. They're not the most killiest thing in the world. Like I look at the Ren characteristic, and I think that makes my heart cry. Unless I'm going into cavalry, or unless I'm going into cavalry that rend 1, or I'm chucking on buffs and supports. It's such a flat baseline, 4s, 3s, 1 for 1. Like that's so bad. That's so bad. But then when you add some of the other layers, it's like, okay, well, how do I make the most of them? They're not bad. I also just think if I've got approximately 200 points, am I better off with a Gouger? Am I better off with 5 Brutes? Or am I better off with Gore Grunters? And I think right now, you're starting to see people go, I'd rather the Brutes. I'd rather the Wreckers or the Ragers. I'd rather the Gouger.
Yeah.
I tell you what I think they're missing. I want to go to the list in a second. The one thing I think they're missing is a mega boss on a Gore Grunter. Because you got your tusk boss on your Mork Grunter that supports your pickies. The mega boss on Mork Crusher and Gordrak don't necessarily buff your cavalry; they're more just general Ironjawz. But I need that free guild cavalry marshal for my knights, my cavaliers. I need that support heats, that Eternus or that demonic Chaos Lord on mount to support the Varangard and the Chaos Knights. I need that equivalent in Ironjawz. So maybe that's the missing piece here to turn them from good to great again, because the synergies just seem to be missing.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know.
Mega boss on Gorgon sounds awesome.
Look, you know what? We got new battle tomes coming. Who effing knows what's coming? I certainly don't. All right. Let's talk some lists, and then I've got some listener questions, and we'll wrap things up.
Cool.
Gork, Mr. or Mrs. Gork, we have Mitch with your list. We have the Ironjawz Brawl. You've tapped into the Morbid Conjuration. 3 drops. Got Gordrak with your More Grunter with Hack and Crew. You've got your Tusk boss on More Grunter with the Eye of Defight and Amberbone with Whetstone. 3 Gougers, then you have a Weird Nod Shaman and 3 Gore Grunters. So there you go. We've still got Gore Grunters in lists. Talk to me a little bit about maybe the high level. We've talked a lot about these units, right? But how does this list particularly work on the tabletop?
Okay, so the main reason I'll explain, I guess, the overall picture of why I wrote this list, right? I love brutes. They are a go-to for me. But what I wanted to do was, when Dave and I were chatting about this list, I wanted to challenge myself and say, okay, what happens if brutes weren't in the book? What does that look like? You know, what happens if I don't have that unit? So the way this list is going to play is essentially a little bit more reserved to start off with, because you want to start to build up your momentum points. So the more grunters, the gougers, the hack and crew, the tusk boss, the way they're going to work is you're going to get 2 points for running, 1 for charging, up to a maximum of 3, at which point they're going to be doing 5 damage, right? So for the first turn, if I don't want to come outside my deployment zone, or whether I do, either or, I'm running, right? I'm going to be generating 2 momentum points. Even if I stand them on the spot, left to right, I'm running, cool, I'm just going to be generating points. And essentially, what's going to happen is I'm going to be sending the 3 Gore Grunters off to do a flank tactic and grab an objective. I'll probably send the hack and crew simply because it's got more attacks on its profile and its little cheeky rule off on the other flank to pretty much try and secure me my tactics early. The more grunter with the hack and crew, what I wanted to get into before was that it has a particular rule where in your movement phase, it can essentially move out of combat, right? It'll trample over something and do mortal wounds, and it can move out of combat. Even though that's just a move, it's not going to be running, it's still going to get 2 points. So it can then charge after that because that isn't a run. So it can, even if it's kind of stuck in combat with something on the flank, once it's done its tactic, it can move off and come in. Like, it's essentially going to be moving on the outwards and start to move inwards once all of its damage has kind of been generated. So the tusk boss, as long as he makes a charge, he can pick 3 of the big pigs and give them an extra momentum point just to make sure that they're at maximum damage. The original list, instead of Gordrak, had a another Gouger, and I believe it was another 3 Gore Grunters. But I guess with Gordrak giving the +1 to hit, it's just you're going to be trying to get that 5 damage a hit off hits on 3s. It's makes it a bit more reliable, and essentially it makes sure that your damage is going to get across. So it's because it's all fast. Essentially, it's going to be moving 9 and 10 inches, other than the Weird Knob. The Weird Knob's got a movement spell of its own, so it's going to be teleporting around the board to grab objectives or to grab terrain. So it's cool. It's just the Weird Knob Shaman could buff up something, but a lot of the spells seem to, I guess, benefit like brutes and things like that. So why I included him was just to go and nab a tactic or 2, an objective, something like that. But yeah, honestly, it's just about sitting there, building up your momentum, scoring your tactics, waiting for your opponent to move on to objectives, sending in that Gouger with a bunch of other Gougers or the Tusk Boss or Gordrak, but you essentially get to a big pile in, right? So one of the Gougers is going to give you fight last on a 2+ at maximum momentum. You're going to swing a bunch of units at it, wipe out that big unit of 6 Vanguard, and then move on. Right, so because those momentum points don't dwindle at the end of every turn, it's at the end of every round, they're in the fight for longer. So it's just great. It's a cool way to play. I mean, it still plays the way I like to. I like to go and, get in there nice and quick and dump damage. It's about just waiting for a little bit, generating those momentum points, and then, going and essentially full send, making some things fight last, dumping a bunch of damage and going from there. And movement wins games, right? So you can get around the board where it needs to, especially if you save those easy tactics for the end of the game, like the flank tactics or the terrain tactics. Once you're kind of in the center of the board fighting for control and you start getting the upper hand, your opponent might find that he's starting to kind of unable to score in the end turns, and you can essentially move left to right and start making a break for the side or towards that terrain piece at the back. So, yeah, I love it. I love this list. Morbid Conjurations in there essentially just for more rend, right? So those big pigs, if they're going to be hitting with extra rend, that 5 damage is huge. So it's really just leaning around generating the damage, generating the rend, and putting it where you need when you need it. So, yeah, I love it. I think it's a fun little list.
Looks like a lot of fun. And one small comment before I move to Dave's list is I know there was a couple of questions about the Army of Renown, the Zagog's Grunter Stampede.
Yeah.
You know, should you drop Gordrak and the Weird Knob Shaman and then just add
Yeah.
more Gouges or Hack and Crews or Tusk Boss? This would fit quite nicely, but I guess the synergy of the Gordrak and the Weird Knob Shaman, I wouldn't want to give up. But if you're looking for something different, there are some really interesting Army of Renown rules you can look into.
Yeah, I
But
think in this addition to it, it's probably important to always have a shaman or a priest or something like that. You know, there's so many cool things that you can do with endless spells at the moment, and I think having a wizard in any list is, for me personally, an auto include. Whether that's one cast or, you know, 10 million casts, it doesn't matter. I need a cast. I need a caster. I need to, if anything, just stop something from coming out if I want it to stop. Or sometimes letting it happen. I mean, if your opponent puts a big endless spell in front of your way, charge it, leapfrog, and try and get your damage to where it's needed. So it's not always bad for opponents to be casting spells, but more or less the debuff kind of spells are probably stop the really, really painful ones. Yeah, that's why I've included the shaman there. And teleport, again, is always nice because, like Dave said earlier, and yourself, Coach, the threat of having a teleport's probably better than having teleport. People will panic, they might deploy wrong, they might play more reserve than when they should go in. So, yeah, I think it's got a lot of access to a lot of different things. Movement, damage, spells, easy tactics. I think it's a well-rounded list.
If there was like an arcane tome that I could chuck onto that tusk ball, maybe I would lead more into that Army of Renown. But especially right now in the benefits of magic and all the stuff that's going on, I feel like it's a trade that's not quite worth it. But you play it, it looks fun. But if I was going to a tournament, I don't think I'd run the Ironjawz Army of Renown personally.
No.
But what Dave would run is the Weird Fist, tapping into the Lore of the Beast. We've got our War Beast. We've gone Cronspine Incarnate. You've got yourself a Weird Knob Shaman, which is the General. You've got a Mega Boss with the Eye of Defight and Armor of Gork. 2 units of Reinforced Brutes. You've then got a War Chanter, 2 of the more Grunter Gouges, and a more Grunter with Hack and Crew. I'm seeing some trends here. We like our big pigs. What a time to be alive. I remember looking at these in the 3rd edition, being so sad that no one would run them, and now we're here. What a time to be alive. Yeah, I love it. Dave, talk to me about how this list works.
I love this list. So I don't think the total points is 1900. I think it's a bit more. I think it's like 1960 or 1970 or something thereabouts.
That's an Anthony mistake. I'll change it now. We'll just go like...
No, anyway, that's all good. That's all good. So I guess a couple of considerations with this one, right? So I think this is, to me, it's kind of almost felt like this was a list that I remember Mitch actually shared with me while I was, dying in bed because I was sick with, the flu and everything. And when he shared me this list, it was just an instant. I'm like, yeah, I love this list. And then I ran a very, very, very similar version of this list in at the GT, and I went 4-1 with it. And the way that the list sort of evolved, it's a list that I feel is designed to really deny other people from scoring their tactics. And it was funny because like a lot of times I'd be giving the other person the option. They would have less drops than me, and they'd be like, all right, Dave, you go first. And I'd go first. I'd just chuck a Gouger and a Hack and Crew to, either flanks. And I wouldn't really move my brutes all that much, to be honest with you. One brute, I'd probably move up a little bit more towards the center so that, I was kind of like in threat of being able to countercharge in the middle if he goes for the middle. And then the amount of times I think I heard in almost all my games during my opponent's turn 1, they'd go, you haven't given me any tactics to score. And I was like, yep. And, if they said, I'm going to score for the middle, and they would go for the middle tactic, which happened a lot of the time. If they lost, the prior for that role, I'd be going into them with 2 sets of brutes flanking from the sides with the Gouges and the Hack and Crew. And it would be nasty. Actually, a lot of my games didn't even go to turn 3 because the whole army would be dead. It was a common problem that I had. I wasn't able to score tactics after turn 3. Yeah, it was like that. It was it happened a couple of times, but it's the brutes just do so much damage, and I think that with the mega boss giving them an extra attack, they really can wipe out pretty much anything they touch. I think there was a Gargan. I remember I could see him. He was just shocked, lifting up his his King Broad and putting him to the side. And he goes, "Well, my friend didn't tell me brutes could do like 56 damage." And I was like, "Yeah, man, they actually hit pretty damn hard, especially when you got the extra attack, the war. Yeah, they're gonna be slapping."
Look, to be fair, one thing that I didn't know they were going to do that much damage either. Like you don't know.
I didn't. Your
mega boss has to roll for that. You know what I mean? Like you don't know. That's what's fun about it. Anything can happen.
What was interesting? I remember it was very reminiscent of when I used to play the Squig Herd, and the Squig Herd I would have like 70, 80 dice, and I'd be like, oh, 1 win, 1 damage, and people are like, oh, that hits so hard. I'm doing the same thing over here with the brutes, except they've got like 2 Ren for the most part, and they're doing 3 damage a pop. It's just so overkill. It's a very satisfying feeling. But essentially, this list over here, it's designed to grab the flanks, give a lot of space in the middle, and then use tricks like redeploy, Mighty Destroyers to creep up when they don't expect us to be creeping up. And if we can instigate the initial engagement, I would say that we've essentially won that game, because whatever we touch is just going to fall over. It's just a really great, fun list, and you got a lot of movement, a lot of shenanigans. Megaboss just stays with the brutes, and I was sort of talking about it before. I really like the idea of this sort of triangle kind of position where you put a unit of brutes on top, you put your Megaboss just behind them or on either side. And then you've got a gouger, and then you have another set of brutes. So anything that charges the brutes, and again, because I'm not advanced as far forward, whatever charges into the brutes is going to get countercharged by more brutes or by the gouger. It's going to give fight last. So I feel like it's a list that wants to kind of move in slowly and then pounce all at once. And if things do come towards you, you have ways to counteract, ways to countercharge, redeploy, move to get in a position where you can hit them. I think it's a very, very fun, very solid list.
I love it. You played it very well, dude. Congrats on that 4-1. It was mad.
Thank you.
And that's the thing.
It was a fun weekend.
The list is not going to win you your game. It's going to be the pilot. They also ignore some of that. I'm pretty sure I also made a mistake there with copying your template. Let's assume it's 2000. But basically, this is Scooter's list. We're talking Scooter because the Novas just happened at the time of recording. It's probably not exactly 2000 points, but it's around that point. This is what Scooter's list was when it comes to Nova. So 4 drops. So I guess the concern that I had earlier about having too many drops, well, here's a 4-drop list. You got Gordrak, Reinforced Brutes, War Chanter with the Eye of the Fight, Gore Grunters Reinforced, War Chanter with the Trophy Skulls, more Gore Grunters, Weird Knob Shaman, and more Gore Grunters. So pigs. It still works, as evident. Top, I think around 20th, so a 20th out of 160 players, which is incredible. And it just shows you again, there's a lot of list diversity that you could tap into. I'm not going to ask Dave or Mitch to comment on this because it's not their list, but you can start to see that all 3 lists here who are doing quite well. And I talked about I'm sure it was Aaron Newbaum's list, which was all about the bloody, what are they called?
I think it was
I think
the other thing was Brute Rages. Yeah, Brute Rages. I think the list was Kragnos with just Brute Rages all across the board. So they've got fights first if they land the charge. So essentially you're just going to charge them in 3d6 and then the whole army's going to hit you. And it's massive. It's just huge. It's great. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
It's going to be so much damage. Yeah.
And my point is that, you know, you've got 4 different lists, and I'm sure you could go onto BCP or some other app and you'd see other different lists doing relatively well, and there's no common thread. Like, you've all taken a different approach, and I think that's a really good spot to be in. Just unfortunately for some of you, it's frustrating because you just don't have the tell me what my 4th edition list is, and
Yeah.
what you're seeing a lot of armies is like just spam the crap out of it, which is not healthy for the game, and it's very short
No.
term.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that's right. Yeah.
Are you ready for some rapid fire questions, and then we can log off?
Sure. Yeah.
Not
Go for
it's getting late, and I love talking to you guys, but I feel like we could be here forever. All right, so 42 these questions are coming from Discord. So 42 asking, there is no spearhead box for Ironjawz. We hope it's coming soon as a part of the Nova reveal. We don't know what it might look like. We're all assuming. So do you have any advice in regards to maybe how you would start an Ironjawz list, whether it's, you know, saving money or maybe some good centerpieces, or any advice given there is no spearhead box for it?
So,
Dave.
like I mentioned before, I was saying that my wife just recently started like an OBR army. And what I would say is, as you could see, just with the 3 lists that were presented today, all those armies play very, very differently. And I think that if you love Ironjawz thematically, I think that you should just gravitate towards the units, the models that you really, really like, because I think that if you can find something that you're passionate about and you really like a particular unit, you'll make whatever it is work, right? So whether it's brutes, whether it's gore grunners, whether it's a task boss or a Mork crusher, I think that all of them have equal levels of play. I think that the playing field is relatively even. So I think make the centerpiece the model that you love. And I think that if you love something, you'll just naturally do a lot better in it, as opposed to me saying you should definitely buy Task Boss, and someone looks at it and go, I don't want a big pig. You're not going to pilot it well. So buy what you like and build around that is the advice that I would give.
Yeah, and you're not going to enjoy playing. You know what I mean? If you're just buying, let's say, a unit just because it's got more powerful rules than something else, but you just don't like the look of it, you don't like how it actually interacts in the game. Let's say, you know, you don't like how slow brutes are, but apparently they're really, really good, and you'd rather, you know, have big pigs or pigs because they move faster. Just go with what you like, and you know, like Dave said, you'll make it work. And you'll have fun doing it too, which is the main thing, right? That's why we all play what we play, and why we do what we do. It's just, you know, if you're not having fun, you're not going to do it.
I think as well, the fact that it's such a small roster means it's hard to make a bad decision. You know, you could start with Ard Boys, with brutes, or with pickies, and just double down into that for a little bit. And at least, you know, you don't have like a Stormcast roster or a Skaven roster where you just you're everywhere. You're everywhere. It's hard to start there, and you need that box. So I think rule of cool for you: work with what you got. But I think if you're going with the meta choices, I think we've discussed a fair amount of meta choices. I think your War Chanter, you're always going to use a War Chanter. A Mega Boss, you can't go without a Mega Boss. A bloody Mork Crusher is cool, whether you make it Gordrak or not. Gore Grunners will be in fashion. Ard Boys or Brutes will be in fashion. Pick your flavor.
Can't go wrong.
No. A couple of other questions. Raj is saying, how to carve a path effectively? So staying in the fight in the movement phase is a really big downside, in my opinion. If you're pinned and you need to live or after getting pinned in. So I guess we've talked a lot about movement. We talked a lot about charging. You know, the dictating the battle. Any particular, I think you guys talked a little bit about the fact that, you know, just don't charge forward straight away, you know, pace yourself a little bit. I guess in Mitch's world, use the momentum points. Any advice around how to, like, I guess, dictate the tempo and carve that path using Raj's words?
It's a bit of a tricky question to answer, because when it comes to, I guess, offering advice on competitive games, there's no silver bullet for anything, for any army. It's all situational. But the way that I approach the game in competitive games is do the least that you can do to score max points, right? So if all I need to do is tap 2 objectives to hold 1, hold 2, and outnumber my opponent, and let's say to score the flank tactics, done. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go and overcommit. I'm not going to rush the game. I'm going to let the game develop as it goes on, right? So when the question was asked, I think it was something about how do we not be in combat in the movement phase, if that's right, Coach. I guess it's just about understanding what your units can and can't do, right? So I'm not going to send 1 Gouger into a unit of 10 Hex Rays and expect to kind of lift them. I'm going to expect that if I don't get, killed in return, I'm going to be stuck in combat with them for quite a while. So it's just about maybe understanding what resources you need to commit to the right units so that you don't get stuck. If I need to send, like I was explaining with my list, if I need to send Gordrak, 1 Gouger, and a hack and crew, big pig into 1 unit, I'll do it. If it means that I can come out on top and then I can go and I'm free to do my movement shenanigans in their hero phase and the redeploys and the counter charges, right? It's all about just understanding what you need to do to not be stuck, pretty much. And that takes time. That takes a lot of times when you do get stuck and you think, geez, I'm never doing that again. And you know what? The next game you might, or you might not. You might not make that mistake, and you live and you learn and you move on until you've made enough mistakes that you all of a sudden become wise and you know what to do. So it's just time spent, but just enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
Hey.
I mean, I agree. I mean, movement is a very tricky part. Like, I think that, Ironjawz in the last edition, particularly, I don't think they were particularly the hardest hitting unit in the game. I think there were definitely units in the game that hit a lot harder, but what we were was a movement army. We had, possibly, I would say, the fastest army in the game, moving 18 inches potentially and 36-inch Maw Crusher. So I think that the more you start, the more experience that you get with movement and being able to, charge and then, you fight and then you cover path or whatever it is, and you can move off with the hack and crew. I think that there's a lot you can do with movement, but it just takes experience. It takes making mistakes, and it might not be obvious at the start, but then the more mistakes you do, as long as you reflect and you ask for feedback at the end of the game, you'll get better.
And you know what? Don't forget, you got that valuable CP for power through, where at the end, you can move around where you need to. So this edition is opening up doors that we didn't have before, right? For movement. It's just about remembering, and I still don't get it right. You know what I mean? Like I played a GT, I think 4 weeks ago and won the whole thing, and I forgot to do power through the entire event. Everyone's still finding their feet with this, you know what I mean? So nobody's perfect. No one's a perfect player. And it's just about, constantly play, understand your army, understand the way your army works in this edition, and you'll start to see results for sure.
2 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. This is coming from Byron, sorry. If the GW team allowed you to make one single change to the army to improve it, whether it be allegiance abilities, war scrolls, or points, what would it be? And don't be ridiculous like your points are like 100-point discounts, like something that's realistic.
Honestly, I think the only thing, if we had this ability back, I reckon I'd be 100% contented. Give us the old smashing and bashing back. If they gave us that back, where instead of the clear a unit get +1 a hit, if they just made us wipe a unit, fight again, I'd be a happy chappy.
I would love, I guess, our Ironjawz rules to somehow affect mounts. Like you've seen my list, it's full of big pigs, it's full of gore grunters. I'd love to have something be able to, I guess, keyword it or anything, however, you'd put it in the book. But I'd love to see certain rules like plus to the attacks and things carry over onto a lot of the mounts attacks, because there's some big damage there. It'd be great. It'd be really, really good. Maybe overpowered, and maybe that's why it hasn't been done, but that's what I'd love to see. That's what I thought when I was writing my list. I thought, that'd be cool if that affected those attacks kind of thing. What about you, Coach?
I actually don't mind what you just said. I think you're an army that relies heavily on a lot of mounts. So playing in the mount department, whether it is mount traits like we used to have in third edition,
Yeah.
whether it is more rules being flexible to only you, that allows
Yeah.
you to do certain things, and that's your faction thing. I actually don't mind that idea, to be honest. I really don't mind. And then obviously the answer, the other obvious answer is bring you back that magical artifact, the Destroyer.
Yeah,
but-
man. There's nothing.
but-
There's nothing like Arcane Tome to round out the army. It just works so nice, didn't it? You know, when you could put it on whatever, pretty much. You could have a mega boss flying around, and he was a wizard. It was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah, I miss rolling those ones when activating Destroyer.
Yeah, I don't miss friend of the channel Austin, who I used to play a lot at Dice Arcade. Would always have Destroyer on that bloody mega boss.
Yeah, man.
It's like, do you focus on it? Do you not focus on it? If I don't focus on it, it's gonna slap me. If I don't have any shooting, I'm in trouble. This thing's coming for me. But anyway,
fight on death as well. Yeah,
and fight on death. That was the thing that terrorized me the most, because he always played me when I was playing an army with no shooting, like just something really basic. I'm like, I hate you. Last question, and then we'll wrap this up. Is I really like this question. So Valgav had asked if there were to if you were going to get a ranged dedicated unit, what do you think it would look like or do? Because you'd certainly have a lack of shooting.
That is a great question.
I think that's cool, isn't it? You know,
Dave, you go first.
when I first started playing, no, I didn't start playing. This is when I was a young little boy, and I was playing fantasy. One of my favorite units was like the Goblin Doom Diver, and it was orcs and goblins. They were both together, right? So ever since then, I've always loved the idea of having like a war machine, just something just to plonk the back and just shoot away. I don't know if the orcs are smart enough to make something like that, though. That's the only thing. But I think it would have to be, I would love like something resembling like a war machine, but it'll just be like a wild, like damage amount. It'll be like D6 damage or something like that, but it's got crazy distance. Like, I think that would be really, really cool. Something really brutal. Make it, I don't know, just real, war machine-y. I think that'd be very fun.
Look, I agree with you, because how I got into my love for greenskins and destruction is the old orcs and goblins, right? And I was around for the time of the rock lobbers and the doom divers, the spear chuckers. But I think in Age of Sigmar, it'd be really cool. It'd go back to Warcraft kind of days where you'd have these units that could throw axes. I'd really like to see some orc axe throwers. It'd be like a little short range shooting attack, but it'd be really, really cool. I'd just like to see some berserker orcs just throwing axes across the board. It'd be great.
Yeah, we're on a similar wavelength. I was actually thinking, for example, like the big. My first thought was like a goblin fanatic, but you throw it instead, right? So almost like the weird brutes, right? Like let's say it's, I don't know, it's a 10-inch range. Like when you're in range, you can just like throw the ball and hit someone for like D3 damage, almost like a fanatic, but it's a shooting attack. I don't know. Something, because long range doesn't seem like it. Long range would be a terrible idea. It just doesn't fit the thematics. And like I thought about, like do you get like an artillery like the scrap launcher? Doesn't really make sense. But like what does? It's either something short range, either on a big pig, or something like, as you said, like throwing hand axes like fire slayers, throwing big balls like, I don't know.
Coach, I love that idea. Give them fanatics so they chuck their big ass balls or their big ass axes. That'd be great. I'd get behind that.
Like, just imagine like these big orcs running up, like just swinging these balls, and then like you just chuck them, and probably hit on 5s or something ridiculous, but like if it hits like a fanatic, like if it hits, it's like Ren 2 or Ren 3 D6 damage, massive, if it hits, it hits, but like it doesn't. They haven't got very good range when you're like doing the was it like the Olympic sports? Was it like what's it called? When you swing around the ball and then you chuck it.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just nod and smile. You know what I'm talking about. It's Olympic sport. Like you spin around in a circle, you throw it. Anyway,
I know it's I don't know what it's called. I'm thinking
It's
of
too
discus or
late.
something, but it's not
it's
discus.
it's too late to be thinking of the Olympics. That was so long ago. Mitch, Dave, thank you for your time. This has been very insightful, a lot of fun. Appreciate everyone who hung out with Australia's internet technology, who was making us glitchy occasionally. I'm hoping in the post audio it's not that bad. And actually, it was not too bad. Like, just seemed like Dave might be having a long breath for a second, but I'm sure we'll fix it up. It'll all work out together. But and Mitch dropping out at the start, like it's rookies, bloody rookies. Gorkamorka.
We got through it. We got through it. It was good. Thanks very much for having us on, Coach. Really appreciate it, man.
No. Are you either of you guys
man.
on the socials? I know Mitch, you're a bit of a under the table.
You can find me. You've just got to look hard. That's all. But no, if you ever want to reach out, jump in Coach's Discord and mention my name, and you track me down. I'm always happy to chat anything about Ironjawz or Destruction. I love it. I love all the
say Mitch's name 3 times and you summon him.
I think I'm pretty.
We'll go with that.
What was that, Dave?
I think I'm pretty easy to find because of my business. I have to have like an online presence. So I'm sure if you type me up, you'll see me in a suit or something like that. So reach out to me if you have any questions. I'll love talking shop. I'm always keen.
Dave, while you're talking, any shout outs to your homies, your gamers, your wife who graciously let you do this on a Tuesday night?
Yeah. I got a shout out to my older brother, Davor. Hi, my wife, Sarah. The OG boys I started playing Warhammer with, Kez, Laz, and MJ. Big hello to you guys, as well as the Chad Hammer crew and the Cake Thieves. All you guys, hello, and love you all.
Love it. And Mitch, yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Love the Cake Thieves, all the boys in there. No, honestly, my loving partner Dallas and my twin brother Christian, awesome player. Play him all the time. He always beats me around the board. I beat him in the tournaments a lot, but he beats me at home, and that's what counts. So, no, I just wanted to shout everybody out there. And you know what? Shameless plug, I'm looking forward to Sydney GT. I've never been. Coach, I'm keen to see you there. Dave, are you coming? Am I going to be able to see you there?
I'm coming. I'm going to be jet lagged as anything. My wife is playing, Sarah, so I'm going to be walking around the tables with beer, probably. Honestly,
I'm just pumped to get into it, man. I've never been, and I've heard really, really great things. Look forward to seeing you guys there and everybody else. If you guys want to come up and have a chat, come and have a chat.
I'm quietly shitting myself. 140 players, second largest event, like 30 or 20 off Nova, 40 off CanCon. It's like I'm running a little CanCon of my own. I'm like, shit, man. What have I got myself into?
You changed the venue, didn't you? Like I said, I've never been, but you changed the venue to have more players this year, didn't you?
Yeah, we expanded. I've now hired a basketball stadium, so
nice. All right.
Very cool.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be sick, man.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
good fun.
So we might look. You know what? We might have some points updates by then. You never know. We don't know.
Probably not. We'll see how we go. Hopefully, something soon. Dave, Mitch, thank you for your time. People who stayed along, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it helps you understand Ironjawz a little better. There's certainly not doom and gloom. It's about working out the list. It's about the mobility. Certainly, it's about learning what your army does and maybe rethinking about how 4th edition has impacted you. You take advantage of the new stuff, how you work around some of the changes. But I don't think you're in a bad spot. I just think we need to look at things a little differently and maybe not over-invest in Gore Grunters, as we've probably reinforced over 2.5 hours. And then Scooter proves us wrong. So what do I know? Just run the thing that you love and you'll work it out. Yeah. I'm going. See you guys. Let's log off. You all stay here for a second, but we'll drop off. Bye, folks. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.